For 12 years, my stepmother dismissed every tear I shed as me just being dramatic. She did not know that the security camera above the fridge was recording when she slapped me across the face on Christmas Eve. She also did not know that the house she was standing in actually belonged to a trust controlled by my grandmother. When Grandma finally spoke up, my stepmother realized that her perfect life was the only thing about to crumble. My name is Kylie Jordan. I am 29 years old, and I act as the content manager for a boutique digital marketing agency called Lighthouse Horizon Media, based right here in Portland. If you were to look at my life from the outside, specifically through the lens of my meticulously curated Instagram feed or the organized state of my small one-bedroom apartment in the Pearl District, you would assume I have completely escaped the gravitational pull of my family dysfunction. I pay my own rent. I have a credit score that hovers near 800. I have a monstera plant that I have managed to keep alive for 3 years, and my linen closet is color-coded. I built a fortress of orderliness and silence around myself, believing that if I just stayed independent enough, the chaos of my upbringing could not touch me. I was wrong. Distance does not erase history, and it certainly does not protect you from people who know exactly which buttons to push because they were the ones who installed them. My mother died when I was 17. That is the timeline marker for everything in my life. There was the before, which was filled with warmth and the smell of cinnamon rolls, and a father who actually looked me in the eye. And then there was the after. The after brought a hollow silence to our house that lasted exactly 2 years before Richard, my father, brought Diane home. Diane was, and remains, a masterpiece of suburban performance art. To the congregation at Grace Community Church, she is Saint Diane. She organizes the bake sales. She runs the charity drives for the homeless. Though she would never actually make eye contact with a homeless person on the street, her Facebook wall is a shrine to domestic bliss, filled with inspirational quotes written in looping calligraphy fonts and photos of her and my father holding hands with captions like, "Blessed beyond measure and family is everything." But the Diane I know does not live on Facebook. The Diane I know lives in the sprawling house in the suburbs of Vancouver, Washington, just across the river, and she speaks a language made entirely of backhanded compliments and sighs that sound like gunshots. It is a strange kind of torture to be a grown woman who still feels like a clumsy child the moment she steps onto her father's porch. I do not live with them anymore, obviously, but the summons are mandatory. Birthdays, Thanksgiving, Easter, and of course, the holy grail of Diane's performative existence, Christmas. For years, the dynamic has been set in stone. I drive north on I-5, fighting the traffic on the bridge, and the moment I walk through the door, I cease to be Kylie Jordan, successful marketing professional. I become the help. It is never stated explicitly. There is never a chore chart. It is much more insidious than that. It is Diane greeting me with a frantic look in her eyes, wearing a pristine silk blouse, saying, "Oh, thank heavens you are here. Kylie, the caterer forgot the garnish for the deviled eggs, and my arthritis is just flaring up terribly today. Could you just jump in and handle the appetizers? You are so good at the messy work." So I put down my purse, I take off my coat, and I spend the next 4 hours in the kitchen while Diane floats through the living room with a glass of Chardonnay. Accepting compliments on the food I'm arranging on platters, I refill the ice buckets. I scrub the roasting pans because the housekeeper does not come on weekends. I watch my father laugh at jokes told by neighbors I barely know, while I stand at the sink with my hands submerged in greasy dishwater. If I were to complain, if I were to say, "Diane, I am a guest, not the maid," the reaction would be immediate and synchronized. My father would look at the floor. Uncomfortable with conflict, Diane would press a hand to her chest, her eyes widening in mock hurt. "Oh, Kylie," she would say, her voice dropping to that pitying register she uses for difficult children. "Do not be so dramatic. We are a family. We help each other. Why do you always have to make everything about you?" Dramatic. That is the word. That is the weapon. They started using it when I was 19, 2 years after Mom died. I was still grieving. still prone to sudden bouts of crying when I saw something that reminded me of her. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one morning, weeping over a burnt piece of toast because it reminded me of how Mom used to scrape the black parts off for me. Diane had walked in, sighed loud enough to rattle the windows, and said to my father, "Richard, you have to do something. She is just so dramatic. It is exhausting walking on eggshells around all this emotion." Instead of defending me, my father had nodded. He looked tired. He wanted the easy life Diane promised, and my grief was difficult. "Kylie," he had said, "maybe you should tone it down a bit. You are being a little dramatic about toast." Over the last decade, I learned to swallow it. I learned that my feelings were inconvenient. I learned that if I reacted to an insult, I was crazy. If I cried because Diane made a joke about my weight or my little internet job, I was oversensitive, so I built a shell. I became the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who showed up, did the dishes, smiled for the photos, and then drove home to cry in the safety of my own shower. The only person who saw through the fog was Grandma Evelyn. My father's mother is nearly 80 years old, but her mind is sharper than a serrated knife. She lives alone in a drafty Victorian house in northwest Portland, refusing to move to the assisted living facility Diane keeps leaving brochures for on her kitchen counter. Grandma Evelyn is the only reason I have not cut them off entirely. She usually sits in the corner of the room at these gatherings, sipping black tea, her eyes darting back and forth like a surveillance camera. She does not fight them openly. She told me once, years ago, "If I fight her, she will cut me off from your father, and then I cannot watch over you." Sometimes, "Kylie, silence is a strategy, not a surrender." But I was starting to doubt that strategy. Just last month, we had a fall harvest dinner. I was running late because of a crisis at work. A client had posted something disastrous on Twitter, and I had to manage the cleanup. I arrived 20 minutes past 6. Dinner was scheduled for 6. When I walked into the dining room, everyone was already seated. My father, Diane, her brother and his wife, 2 cousins, and Grandma Evelyn. "Look who decided to grace us with her presence," Diane announced as I entered. She did not stand up to greet me. She just gestured vaguely with her fork. We went ahead and started. We know how fluid your sense of time is. "Kylie, I told everyone not to worry, that you probably just got overwhelmed with something trivial again." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. "I was working, Diane. I told Dad I would be late." "Working," Diane said, putting air quotes around the word. She turned to her sister-in-law. "Kylie plays on Facebook all day. It sounds very stressful." The table erupted in polite, chuckling laughter. My father took a sip of his wine and did not look at me. "It is content management," I said, my voice tight. "I manage digital strategy for 3 Fortune 500 companies." "See," Diane said, tilting her head. "So defensive, always so touchy. Sit down, dear. There might be some cold potatoes left if you scrape the bowl." I sat. I unfolded my napkin. I looked at the empty serving platters in the center of the table, then at the full plates of the guests. No one had saved me anything. I looked at Grandma Evelyn. Her lips were pressed together so tightly they had turned white. She gave me a microscopic nod, a signal to hold my ground. Under the table, I pulled out my phone. I opened the Notes app. I have a folder in there simply titled The List. I typed, November 14th, mocked my career in front of strangers. Called me defensive for correcting her. Dad said nothing. No food saved. I have been doing this for 2 years, writing it down, because when they call you dramatic long enough, you start to question your own reality. You start to wonder if maybe you are the problem. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I did imagine the malice in her tone. The notes were my anchor. They were proof that things happened the way I remembered them. That dinner ended like all the others. I cleared the table while Diane played the piano for her guests. I loaded the dishwasher. I drove home feeling like I had been hollowed out with a spoon. And now, it is December. The rain in Portland has turned relentless, a gray curtain that has not lifted in weeks. I was driving home from the grocery store tonight, the windshield wipers slapping a frantic rhythm against the glass. The radio was playing a jazz version of Silent Night, which felt mocking given the knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. I turned the volume down. I stopped at a red light on Burnside Street and watched the pedestrians huddled under umbrellas, rushing toward warmth. I wondered what it felt like to look forward to going home to family. I wondered what it felt like to have a mother who would call just to ask how your day was, rather than to ask if you remembered to pick up her dry cleaning before the party. If this is family, I whispered to the empty car, then what would an enemy even look like? An enemy would be honest. At least, an enemy would stab you in the front. Diane preferred to poison the water supply and then ask why you look so sick. My phone was mounted on the dashboard. Suddenly, the screen lit up. Cutting through the dark interior of the car, it was a notification from the group chat titled Jordan Family Joy. I felt a physical jolt of adrenaline, the bad kind. The light turned green, but I hesitated for a second before pressing the gas. I knew what it was before I even pulled over to read it. I guided my Honda Civic to the curb, the tires splashing through a deep puddle. I picked up the phone. Diane. Dearest family, I am so thrilled to announce that we will be hosting our traditional Christmas Eve dinner at the house this year. Richard and I have been planning for weeks to make this the most special one yet, a true celebration of our blessings. I scrolled down. Diane. Kylie, sweetheart, we are counting on you to be there early. We have so much to prepare, and I know how much you love being helpful in the kitchen. It is going to be magical. Love you all. There were 3 heart emojis. I stared at the screen. The text seemed innocuous enough, warm, even, to an outsider. It read like a loving stepmother inviting her daughter home for the holidays. But I knew the code. Traditional meant rigid adherence to Diane's script. Special meant she had an audience she wanted to impress. Helpful meant I would be working. And love you all meant do not you dare disobey me. I looked at the rain streaking the passenger window. I could say no. I was 29. I could say I had COVID. I could say I had to work. I could say I was flying to Mexico. But then I thought of Grandma Evelyn. I had not seen her in 3 weeks. If I did not go, Diane would isolate her. If I did not go, Diane would spend the entire evening spinning a narrative about how selfish and ungrateful I was, and there would be no one there to correct the record. I also noticed something else in the text. A true celebration of our blessings. Diane usually used the word blessings when she was talking about money. My thumb hovered over the screen. I felt that old familiar cocktail of guilt and obligation swirling in my throat. I did not want to go. Every cell in my body was screaming at me to turn the car around, drive to the coast, and check into a motel until January. But I am a Jordan. We do not run. We endure. I typed back. Sounds great. I will be there. I locked the phone and threw it onto the passenger seat. It landed face down. I merged back into traffic, the red taillights of the cars ahead blurring into long, bloody streaks on the wet asphalt. I did not know it then, but I had just accepted an invitation to my own execution. Or maybe, just maybe, it was theirs. I turned the radio up. Silent Night had ended. Now, the station was playing God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen. Let nothing you dismay. The song went. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I was done being dismayed. I was done being sad. The sadness was hardening into something else, something cold and sharp and heavy in the pit of my stomach. I just hoped I could survive one more night of being dramatic. The apartment was cold when I got inside. I kicked off my boots and walked to the kitchen island. I opened a bottle of Pinot Noir, the cheap stuff I kept for myself, not the vintage labels Diane collected to show off, and poured a glass. My phone pinged again, another message. Diane. Oh, and bring your famous cranberry sauce. The canned stuff is just so tacky, do not you think? I laughed, a dry, humorless sound in the empty room. My famous cranberry sauce was just a recipe I found on Pinterest 5 years ago, but Diane insisted I make it from scratch every year so she could tell guests. Kylie made this, isn't it quaint? I took a sip of wine. I opened my notes app again. I typed, December 2nd. The summons arrived. The trap is baited. I closed the app. I did not know why I felt such a sense of foreboding. It was just Christmas dinner. It was just turkey and stuffing and passive-aggressive comments about my hair. But the feeling persisted. It felt like the air pressure dropping before a storm. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights of Portland. Somewhere out there, in the dark, Grandma Evelyn was probably sitting in her armchair, drinking tea, waiting for the same storm. I raised my glass to the reflection in the glass. To family, I said softly, and to whatever hell awaits in Vancouver. I finished the wine in one swallow. I had 3 weeks to prepare. I had no idea that this Christmas, the gift I would be receiving wasn't wrapped in paper. It was going to be the truth, and it was going to hurt like a slap to the face. I went to bed, but I slept with the lights on. 3 days before Christmas, my phone vibrated against the mahogany surface of my desk. I stared at the screen, watching the name Diane pulse in bright white letters, a digital demand for attention that made my stomach tighten. I let it ring 4 times before picking up. I needed those 4 rings to armor myself, to pull on the professional persona I wore like a shield at Lighthouse Horizon Media. "Hello, Diane," I said, keeping my voice flat and neutral. "Kylie! Oh, thank goodness you picked up," Diane's voice trilled, dripping with that specific brand of high-pitched sweetness she reserved for when she wanted something. It was like biting into a piece of fruit that was rotting from the inside out. "I was worried you were buried under work again. You know how we worry about you stressing yourself out with that internet job of yours?" I took a breath. "I am fine. Diane, what is up?" "Well, I was just finalizing the schedule for the 25th, she said, breezing past my question. "And I wanted to make sure you could come a little early. Not to work. Heavens, no. Richard and I promised this year is about relaxation. But there are just a few tiny logistical things I need a second set of eyes on. You have such a gift for organization. And honestly, my arthritis is acting up with this damp weather." I gripped my pen until my knuckles turned white. It was always the arthritis, or a migraine, or a vague spell of dizziness that conveniently vanished the moment the guests arrived. "Diane, I really—" "Wait, hold on," she interrupted, her voice muffling slightly as if she was turning away from the receiver. Richard, she is on the phone." A moment later, my father's voice came on the line, breathless and eager. "Kylie, honey, are you there?" "I am here, Dad." "Listen, you have to come early," he said, his tone dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that tugged violently at my chest. "I was cleaning out the attic for the renovations Diane wants to do, and I found a box. It has the old VHS tapes from 98 and 99, the ones your mom took at the Oregon coast." My heart stopped. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had not seen moving images of my mother in 10 years. The last time I asked about the tapes, Diane had claimed they were lost during a move. "You found them?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. "I did," he promised. "We can set up the projector before the guests arrive. Just us, you, me, and Diane. We will watch them together. It will be nice, honey, a real family moment, please." He knew exactly what he was doing, or maybe he did not. Maybe he was just a pawn in Diane's game, the soft bait on the sharp hook, but it did not matter. He had offered me the one thing I could not refuse, a few minutes with the ghost of the woman who actually loved me. "Okay," I whispered. "I will be there early." Diane came back on the line instantly, as if she had been hovering inches from the speaker. "Wonderful. Oh, it is going to be perfect. And Kylie, dress nicely. Will you? We have some very important people coming this year. My cousins from Seattle, of course, but also Mr. Henderson and his wife. He is partnering with your father on that new commercial real estate development in Vancouver." I frowned. "On Christmas? Why are business partners coming to a family dinner?" "It is not just business, silly," Diane laughed, a light tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "It is about the future. Richard is doing some restructuring of the finances. We want to make sure the house and the family assets are arranged correctly for the long term. It is important you are there to represent the family. We want everyone to see how united we are." The words restructuring and assets hung in the air like smoke. My father had never been good with money. Mom had been the practical one. Since Diane took over the books, things had become opaque. They drove luxury cars and took trips to Europe, yet there were always whispers about tightening belts whenever I needed help with college tuition years ago. "Fine," I said. "I will see you then." I hung up and immediately dialed Grandma Evelyn. She answered on the first ring. "Did she call you?" "She called," I said, leaning back in my office chair and staring at the rain streaking the window. Dad got on the line. He said he found the tapes of Mom, the ones from the coast. Grandma Evelyn let out a sharp, derisive snort. "Convenient timing, just when they need you to cater their little show for the investors." "I do not want to go, Grandma," I confessed, the professional veneer cracking. "I feel sick just thinking about it. I know what is going to happen. I will walk in. The tapes will accidentally not work, or we won't have time, and I will end up scrubbing pans while Diane talks about asset allocation with strangers." "You are probably right," Grandma said, her voice rasping with age but solid as oak. "But listen to me, Kylie. If you do not go, do you know what happens? They tell the story without you. Diane will look at those empty chairs and tell Mr. Henderson and her cousins how her poor stepdaughter is too unstable to show up, how you are estranged, how you simply do not care about the family legacy, and by the time dessert is served, she will have justified writing you out of everything." I closed my eyes. "So I have to go just to prove I exist?" "Sometimes," Grandma said softly. "Presence is a form of self-defense. You go, you stand tall, and you do not let them erase you. I will be there, remember? I will be watching." Christmas Eve arrived with a torrential downpour, the kind that turns the Interstate 5 bridge over the Columbia River into a gauntlet of blinding spray and red taillights. I drove north, my windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the deluge. As the gray concrete of Portland gave way to the suburban sprawl of Vancouver, my mind drifted back 12 years. I was 17. My mother had been in the hospice wing for 3 weeks, shrinking daily into the white sheets. That was when I first met Diane. She had not been stepmom Diane then. She was just a woman from Dad's church who volunteered to bring cookies to the families in the waiting room. I remembered looking up from my chemistry textbook, eyes red and swollen, to see this woman in a bright yellow cardigan standing over me with a tin of snickerdoodles. "You must be Kylie," she had said. Her voice was soft then, lacking the jagged edges it had now. She sat down next to me, uninvited. "I know you do not know me, but I am praying for your mother, and for you." She had placed a hand on my knee. I flinched, but she did not pull away. "I know you are scared," she whispered, "but I want you to know, no matter what happens, no one can ever replace her. I would never try. I just want to be a friend." A friend. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as I took the exit toward my father's neighborhood. That friend had moved into my mother's bedroom 4 months after the funeral. That friend had boxed up my mother's clothes and donated them to Goodwill while I was at school because it is unhealthy to live in a museum. That friend had slowly, methodically, surgically removed every trace of the woman who built that home, replacing warmth with beige upholstery and passive aggression. I pulled into the driveway. The house was ablaze with light. It looked like a Thomas Kincaid painting, glowing with golden warmth against the dark, wet evening. A massive wreath hung on the front door, and I could see the twinkling lights of the 12-foot tree through the bay window. I took a deep breath, checked my lipstick in the rearview mirror, and stepped out into the rain. The moment I opened the front door, I was hit by a wall of sensory perfection. The air smelled of rosemary, roasting turkey, and expensive pine candles. Bing Crosby was crooning White Christmas on the surround sound system. "She is here!" Diane's voice cut through the music. She swept into the foyer, wearing a velvet dress in a deep forest green that I knew cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair was coiffed into a stiff, perfect helmet of blonde highlights. Before I could even shake the rain off my coat, she engulfed me in a hug. It was tight, suffocating, and performed entirely for the benefit of the 4 people standing in the living room holding wine glasses. "Our daughter is finally home," Diane announced, pulling back and holding me at arm's length, her nails digging slightly into my biceps. She beamed at the guests. "This is Kylie. She works in media in the city." "Hi," I said, forcing a smile. My father emerged from the living room. He looked tired. His hairline receded further than I remembered, but he smiled when he saw me. "Hi, honey." "Dad," I said, stepping toward him. "The tapes? Did you set them up?" Diane interjected before he could answer. She laughed, a light, dismissive sound. "Oh, Kylie, honey, we simply ran out of time. The guests arrived a bit early, and the projector bulb was burnt out. We will do it another time, I promise." I felt the cold stone of disappointment settle in my stomach. It was exactly what I had expected, yet it still stung. "You said—" Now, Diane whispered, leaning in close so only I could hear. The warmth vanished from her eyes, replaced by steel. "Do not make a scene, not in front of the investors. Smile." She pulled a folded piece of cardstock from her pocket and pressed it into my hand. "What is this?" I asked. "Just a little list," she said, her voice returning to full volume, bright and cheery. "Since you are here, and you have so much young energy, much more than us old folks, I thought you could just manage the kitchen flow. The caterer dropped everything off, but it needs plating, heating, and serving, and the table needs to be set. The crystal glasses, Kylie, not the everyday ones." I looked down at the list. It was single-spaced. 1. Preheat oven to 350 degrees. 2. Baste turkey every 20 minutes. 3. Arrange charcuterie board. Make it look artistic. 4. Steam the green beans. 5. Ensure wine glasses are never empty. "Diane," I said, lowering my voice, "you said I was coming to eat, to be with family." "And you are," she beamed, patting my cheek. "The kitchen is the heart of the home, isn't it? Besides, you know how overwhelmed I get. Do it for your father. He really needs this deal to go through tonight." She turned on her heel and floated back toward the living room. "Richard, darling, pour Mr. Henderson another scotch. He was just telling me about the market trends in Seattle." I stood alone in the hallway, the list heavy in my hand. My father looked at me, gave a helpless, apologetic shrug, and turned back to his guests. He chose the path of least resistance, just as he always did. I walked into the kitchen. It was a disaster zone of prep containers and dirty pans. The perfect hostess illusion stopped at the swinging door. For the next 2 hours, I ceased to be a person. I became a machine. I moved between the oven and the island, basting, chopping, and arranging. Through the gap in the door, I could see them. Diane was holding court on the white sofa, laughing at a joke Mr. Henderson made. She looked radiant, the picture of the benevolent matriarch. My father was nodding along, looking relieved that things were going smoothly. They were drinking the expensive Cabernet I had bought them for their anniversary last year. "Is Kylie joining us?" I heard a woman's voice ask. "Mrs. Henderson." I froze, holding a tray of stuffed mushrooms. "Oh, she prefers to be in the kitchen." Diane's voice drifted through. "She is a bit of a loner, honestly. She is not very stable emotionally. We try to give her structured tasks. It helps her feel useful. We are trying to help her grow up by giving her more responsibility." "That is very generous of you," Mrs. Henderson said. "Step-parenting is such a challenge." "It is a cross I bear with joy," Diane sighed. I felt tears prick my eyes, not of sadness, but of a hot, corrosive fury, not stable, a cross to bear. I set the tray down on the counter with a clatter. My hands were shaking. I wanted to march out there and scream. I wanted to flip the table. "Dramatic," a voice in my head whispered. "If you go out there, you are just proving her point. You are being dramatic." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, wiping my greasy hands on my apron. It was a text from Grandma Evelyn. Grandma Evelyn, I am 5 minutes away. Also, fix your hair. Sweetheart, you look angry. I frowned. How did she know I looked angry? Grandma Evelyn, and check the camera angle. I can see you clearly, but I cannot hear what they are saying in the living room. I looked up, above the refrigerator, blinking with a tiny, almost invisible blue light, was the smart home security camera I had installed for my father 6 months ago. I had set it up to monitor the back door and the kitchen for fire safety. I was the admin on the account. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the drafty window. Grandma was watching. I looked at the phone again. Grandma Evelyn, you came safely? Are you okay? I typed back, I am the help. Again, she is talking about me to the guests. Grandma Evelyn, I know. I can read her lips even from the front door camera when she greets them. Keep your head up. I am coming in. And Kylie, leave the kitchen door propped open slightly. I want the camera to hear the dinner conversation. I stared at the message. Grandma Evelyn was plotting. I took a deep breath and walked over to the swinging door. I nudged it open with my foot, using a heavy doorstop to keep it ajar just enough so that the sound from the dining room would drift clearly toward the refrigerator. Then, I picked up the tray of mushrooms. I smoothed my skirt. I wiped the anger off my face and replaced it with a mask of cool, detached professionalism. Dinner is served, I whispered to the empty kitchen. I pushed through the doors, carrying the tray. Ah, there she is, Diane announced, clapping her hands. Just in time. Kylie, serve Mr. Henderson first, and then be a dear and fetch the water pitcher. We are parched. I moved toward the table, my eyes locking briefly with the empty chair at the head of the table where Grandma Evelyn would soon sit. The game was rigged. I knew that. But for the first time, I realized that Diane wasn't the only one playing. Of course, Diane, I said, my voice steady. Anything for family. I placed the mushrooms down. As I did, I saw my father look away, unable to meet my gaze. He knew this was wrong. He knew the restructuring talk was a sham to secure his own comfort at my expense, but he was weak. And tonight, I had a feeling that weakness was going to cost him more than he could afford. The doorbell rang. That must be Mother Jordan, Diane said, her smile tightening just a fraction. Kylie, go get the door, and please, do not let her track mud onto the hardwood. I walked to the door, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs. I opened it to find Grandma Evelyn standing there, leaning on her cane, rain dripping from her gray coat, but her eyes were dry, and they were burning with a fierce, cold intelligence. Hello, Grandma, I said. She stepped inside, ignoring Diane's rule about the mud. She looked at me, then past me toward the kitchen, and then toward the dining room where the laughter was loud and hollow. Ready? She asked quietly. I think so, I said. Good, she said, unbuttoning her coat. Because I am tired of this story. It is time we wrote a new ending. She took my arm, and together, we walked into the lion's den. The dinner table was set with the kind of precision that usually precedes a surgery. Crystal wine glasses caught the flicker of the candlelight, casting sharp, dancing shadows on the white linen tablecloth. The centerpiece, a sprawling arrangement of holly and white roses, was low enough to allow for conversation, but high enough to hide the fact that my father was on his third glass of scotch and staring intently at his plate. Grandma Evelyn sat at the far end, opposite my father. She had barely touched her food, her posture rigid, her eyes tracking Diane's movements like a hawk watching a field mouse. I sat in the middle, squeezed between Mr. Henderson, the property developer, and one of Diane's cousins from Seattle who kept asking me why I was not married yet. Diane stood up, tapping a silver spoon against her glass. The ringing sound cut through the murmur of conversation. If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment, she said, her voice shimmering with that practiced, breathless delight. She placed a manicured hand on my father's shoulder. He flinched, almost imperceptibly, but she squeezed harder. Richard and I just want to propose a toast. To family. To to the bonds that hold us together through the storm. She raised her glass, her eyes sweeping the table before landing heavily on me. And to sacrifice, she added, her smile not reaching her eyes. Because real love is about knowing when to step back and sacrifice your own selfish wants for the greater good of the whole unit. To sacrifice. To sacrifice, the guests echoed. I did not lift my glass. I stared at the cranberry sauce I had spent an hour making, feeling the word sacrifice settle around my neck like a noose. We began to eat. The turkey was dry, but everyone praised it as if it were a culinary revelation. 10 minutes into the meal, Diane cleared her throat. Speaking of the future, she began, turning her attention to Mr. Henderson. Richard and I had such a productive meeting with our estate attorney this week. We finally signed the papers to restructure the family assets for the long term. My father coughed into his napkin. Diane, maybe this isn't the time. Nonsense. Richard, she breezed past him. We are all friends here, and honesty is so important. We decided it was time to ensure the house and the primary investments are protected. We want to make sure the legacy goes to those who can. Manage it responsibly. Mr. Henderson nodded sagely, slicing his turkey. Smart move. Generational wealth disappears if you do not lock it down. He chuckled and looked at me, winking. So, what is the verdict for the daughter? Did you get the keys to the kingdom, young lady? The table went quiet. I felt the blood rush to my ears. I looked at my father, silently begging him to say something, to defend me, to explain that I had never asked for their money, only their respect. He did not look up. Diane laughed. It was a cold, tinkling sound. Oh, Mr. Henderson, you are terrible. No. We decided that for Kylie, the best gift we could give her is independence. She has her little job, and she is still finding her footing in the real world. We would hate to burden her with assets she is not equipped to handle. She took a sip of wine, peering at me over the rim of the glass. Besides, we do not want her to rely on us. Kylie has always been so emotional. We feel that money would just add fuel to her fire. She needs to learn stability first. I felt like I had been slapped. It was not about the money. I made my own money. It was the public declaration that I was defective, that I was a child who could not be trusted. I have a 401k, I said, my voice quiet but steady. I have excellent credit. I manage budgets of over $50,000 a month for my clients. Diane waved her hand dismissively. See? There she goes, always so defensive, always having to prove a point. It is exactly what we were talking about. Richard. She takes everything so personally. I am correcting a misconception, I said, gripping my fork. You are being dramatic, Diane said. The word landed in the center of the table like a grenade. Just like the time at your mother's funeral. My breath hitched. Diane, do not. But she had the audience now. She leaned in toward Mr. Henderson and her cousins, dropping her voice to a theatrical whisper. Oh, it was heartbreaking. Really, but also so exhausting. You know, everyone was sad. We were all grieving. But Kylie? She threw herself onto the casket, literally threw herself, screaming, wailing. It was a bit much. It made everyone so uncomfortable. She just has to be the center of attention, even in tragedy. Laughter rippled around the table. Not malicious laughter from everyone. Some of it was awkward, nervous laughter. But from Diane's cousins, it was genuine amusement. That is not what happened, I said. My voice was shaking. I was 17. I was burying my mother. I tripped because I was dizzy from crying for 3 days straight. Oh, honey, you do not have to rewrite history. Diane smiled, her teeth white and predatory. We all saw it. You were putting on a show. Just like the time you called the police because Richard was 10 minutes late picking you up from soccer practice. Always the drama queen. That was when I was 12, I said, my voice rising. And he was 2 hours late. It was dark. I was scared. See? Diane gestured to me with her fork. Listen to that tone. Hysterical. Even now. Over a nice Christmas dinner. She cannot just sit and be pleasant. She has to pick a fight. Mrs. Henderson, who had seemed nice earlier, leaned over to my father. Richard, you really are a saint. You are lucky Diane puts up with her. Not every stepmother would have the patience for that kind of personality disorder. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was the quiet sound of a tether finally breaking. I looked at my father. He was cutting his potatoes into tiny, microscopic squares. He heard every word. He heard his wife mock my grief. He heard a stranger call me disordered, and he said nothing. I placed my napkin on the table. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. I am leaving, I said. The table went silent. Sit down, Kylie, my father mumbled. Finally, looking up, his eyes were pleading, but not for me. He was pleading for me not to embarrass him. Do not ruin this. I am not ruining anything, I said. Standing up, my legs felt weak, but I locked my knees. I came here because I wanted to see my family, but I will not sit here and be insulted. I will not let you turn my mother's death into a funny anecdote for your business partners. Oh, for heaven's sake, Diane scoffed, rolling her eyes. Stop acting like a victim. It is Christmas. Sit down and eat your turkey. No, I said. I am done. Enjoy your restructuring. Dad, I hope it was worth it. I turned and walked toward the kitchen. My purse and coat were in the hallway, but I needed to go through the kitchen to get to the back door where I had parked to avoid blocking the guests. Kylie, get back here, Diane barked. Her perfect hostess mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the snarling dog beneath. I kept walking. I pushed through the swinging door into the kitchen. The kitchen was quiet, a stark contrast to the dining room. The harsh fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The unwashed pans from my cooking marathon were piled in the sink. I moved toward the back door, my hand reaching for the knob. Do not you dare walk away from me. The swinging door flew open and hit the wall with a bang. Diane stormed in. She was not floating anymore. She was stomping. Her face was flushed red, her eyes manic. She grabbed my arm and spun me around. Let go of me, I said, yanking my arm back. We were standing directly in front of the refrigerator, directly under the blinking blue light of the safety camera. You selfish little brat, Diane hissed. Her voice was low, venomous. We have guests out there, important guests, and you have to make it all about you, just like always. You just could not stand that we were happy. Could you? You had to drag your dark, miserable cloud over my dinner. Your dinner? I laughed, a sharp, jagged sound. I cooked the dinner, Diane. I set the table. I did everything you asked. All I asked for was basic human decency. Decency? She stepped closer, invading my personal space. I could smell the expensive wine on her breath. You do not deserve decency. You are a leech. You come here. You eat our food. You take your father's money, and you give nothing back but attitude. I do not take his money, I said. I have not taken a dime from him in 6 years. You take his energy, she screamed, her voice cracking. You drain him. He comes home depressed every time he talks to you. You are a burden, Kylie. That is all you are. A burden. She paused, her eyes narrowing. Then she played her ace card. You know, she said, her voice dropping to a cruel whisper, I thank God every day that your mother isn't here to see what you have become. She would be so ashamed of you. She would look at you, this ungrateful, dramatic, pathetic woman, and she would wish she had never had you. The world stopped. The hum of the refrigerator faded. I looked her dead in the eyes. I saw the malice there. I saw the deep, insecurity-driven need to destroy anyone who threatened her dominance. Do not, I said, my voice trembling with rage. Talk about my mother. You did not know her. You erased her from this house, but you do not get to erase her love for me. She would hate you, Diane screamed. No, I said, stepping forward, matching her intensity. She would hate you. She would hate that you manipulated a grieving man. She would hate that you bully his daughter, and she would hate that you are a small, insecure woman who has to tear others down to feel tall. I am not playing your game anymore, Diane, I continued. I am not the dramatic teenager you can gaslight. I am a grown woman, and I am done. Diane's face contorted. The mask was gone completely now. She looked ugly. You shut up, she shrieked. You shut up, you little… She raised her hand and swung. It was not a theatrical slap. It was hard. It was violent. Her palm connected with my cheekbone with a sickening crack that echoed off the tile backsplash. My head snapped to the side. The pain was instantaneous, hot and stinging. I stumbled back, shocked. I had expected words. I had expected manipulation. I had not expected this. You, I started to say. Diane did not stop. She lunged forward, shoving me with both hands. Get out of my house! I crashed backward into the granite countertop. My hip hit the edge hard. My arm flailed out to catch my balance, and my hand swept across the drying rack. A heavy crystal water pitcher, one of the ones I had washed by hand earlier, slid off the counter. It hit the floor and shattered. The sound was explosive, like a gunshot in the small room. Diane grabbed my shoulders, her nails digging into my skin through my sweater. She shook me, hitting my upper arm with her closed fist. You ruin everything! You ruin everything! I put my hands up to block her, catching her wrists. I was younger, stronger. I pushed her back, just enough to create space. Do not touch me, I yelled. Diane stumbled back, panting. Her hair was disheveled. Her chest was heaving. Suddenly, the swinging door pushed open. What on earth is going on in here? It was Mr. Henderson, behind him. My father and the other guests were crowding the doorway, their eyes wide. Diane froze. She looked at the shattered glass on the floor. She looked at me, holding my stinging cheek. She looked at the guests. And then, in the blink of an eye, she changed. Her shoulders slumped, her face crumpled. Tears, instant, magical tears, welled up in her eyes. She brought a hand to her mouth, looking at me with terrified disbelief. But she did not know about the blue light blinking above the fridge. She did not know that the lens had captured the arc of her hand, the force of her shove, the venom in her face before the guests arrived. She did not know that the cloud server had already finished uploading the clip. I stood there, my cheek throbbing, my hip aching, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel the urge to cry. I felt the cold, hard resolve of a soldier who has just been handed the ammunition to win the war. Diane whispered, pointing a shaking finger at me. She just went crazy. I stared at her, and then I looked up, just for a second, directly into the camera lens. Got you, I thought. The silence that followed the shattering of the crystal pitcher lasted for perhaps 2 seconds, but in my mind, it stretched out into an eternity. It was enough time for me to see the transition happen. I watched Diane's face rearrange itself, the snarl of rage that had been there a moment ago, the bared teeth, the flared nostrils, simply dissolved. It was replaced instantly by a mask of sheer, trembling terror. Her hands, which had just been shoving me, flew to her chest, clutching the fabric of her green velvet dress as if she were the one who had been struck. "Oh my God!" she wailed, her voice pitching up a full octave into a sound of pure distress. "Kylie, please, stop! I am sorry. I am sorry for whatever I did to make you this angry." I stood frozen, my hand instinctively cupping my left cheek where the skin was already beginning to burn and tighten. My hip throbbed from where I had slammed into the granite counter. I stared at her, my mouth slightly open, unable to comprehend the speed of the performance. What happened? My father's voice boomed from the doorway. He pushed past Mr. Henderson, his face flushed with alcohol and embarrassment. He looked at the shattered glass on the floor, the water pooling around our feet, and then he looked at Diane, who was now sobbing into her hands. "Richard!" Diane cried, rushing toward him and burying her face in his chest. I tried to calm her down. I just wanted to talk to her about why she was leaving, and she just snapped. She started screaming that she hated me, that she hated this house. She picked up the pitcher. I thought she was going to hit me with it. "That is a lie," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, thin and distant. "She hit me. She slapped me in the face and shoved me." My father looked at me. He looked at the red mark that was surely blooming on my cheek. He had to see it. It was right there. But Diane was sobbing louder now, clinging to him. "I tried to stop her from breaking the glasses. Richard," I grabbed her arm to stop her, and she just threw herself back. "She is out of control. I was so scared." My father's eyes shifted from my face to the broken glass, and then to the guests huddled in the doorway, his business partner, the investors, the people he needed to impress. I saw the calculation happen behind his eyes. He could believe his daughter, which would mean admitting his wife was a violent abuser in front of his financial future, or he could believe the narrative that saved face. He sighed, a heavy, disappointed sound that hurt more than the slap. "Kylie," he said, his voice low and weary, "look at this mess." "Dad, she hit me," I repeated, stepping forward. "Look at my face." He refused to look closely. He shook his head, running a hand through his thinning hair. "You have to learn how to control your emotions. Kylie, you cannot just explode every time things do not go your way. You are nearly 30 years old. This behavior, it is too much." The air left my lungs. "My behavior?" "We were having a nice dinner," he continued, his voice gaining strength now that he had chosen a side. "Diane has been working for days to make this nice for you. And you throw a tantrum? You break things?" "I did not break it," I whispered. "She shoved me." "Stop it," he snapped. "Just stop. I cannot deal with the drama tonight. Not tonight." He turned his back on me to comfort Diane, stroking her hair. "It is okay, honey. It is okay. She is having a hard time." I looked at the guests. Mr. Henderson was looking at the floor, awkwardly swirling his wine. Diane's cousins were whispering to each other, shaking their heads with looks of pity. Pity for Diane, not for me. I was the villain. In the span of 60 seconds, I had become the unstable, violent stepdaughter destroying Christmas. I did not say another word. There was no point. The script had been written, and I had been cast in a role I could not escape. I stepped over the broken glass and walked out of the kitchen. I had to squeeze past Mrs. Henderson in the hallway. She actually pulled her shawl tighter around herself as I passed, as if my instability might be contagious. I went into the downstairs powder room and locked the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely slide the bolt home. I leaned over the sink, gripping the cold porcelain, and stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked wild. My hair was frizzy from the kitchen steam. My eyes were wide and wet, and there, on my left cheekbone, was a distinct, rising welt. It was bright red, the imprint of fingers clearly visible against my pale skin. On my upper arm, where she had grabbed me, bruises were already beginning to form, faint purple shadows that would be black by morning. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My fingers were clumsy, but I managed to open the camera app. Click. I took a photo of my face, turning my head to catch the light on the welt. Click. I took a photo of my arm. Click. I took a photo of the tear in my sweater where it had caught on the counter edge. I opened my messages and found the thread with Sarah, my best friend since college. I selected the photos and hit send. My thumbs flew across the keyboard. If I change my mind tomorrow, or if they try to talk me out of it, remind me that this is real. Remind me that this actually happened. I splashed cold water on my face, avoiding the sore spot. I took a deep breath. I did not cry. I could not cry. If I cried, I would collapse, and I needed to get out of this house before I suffocated. I unlocked the bathroom door. The hallway was empty. I could hear low voices in the living room. Diane's voice, soft and trembling, undoubtedly recounting more details of my episode. I grabbed my coat from the rack. I did not say goodbye. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cold, driving rain. The fresh air hit me like a physical blow. I walked down the driveway, the gravel crunching under my boots. The rain mixed with the heat on my face, cooling the sting. As I reached for my car door, a movement across the street caught my eye. Standing under the yellow glow of a street lamp, huddled inside a thick wool coat with a scarf wrapped around her head, was Grandma Evelyn. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking past me, her gaze fixed intently on the kitchen window where the light was still blazing. She must have slipped out the back or the side door when the shouting started. She stood there like a sentinel, unmoving despite the downpour. Her face was grim, her mouth set in a hard line. She did not wave. She just watched the house. Our eyes met for a second. She gave me a single, sharp nod. It wasn't a greeting. It was an acknowledgement. I saw, I know, go. I got into my car and locked the doors. I started the engine, blasting the heater to stop the shivering that had started in my extremities. I put the car in reverse and backed out, leaving the picture-perfect house with its twinkling lights and its rot behind me. I drove for 20 minutes in silence. The only sound was the rhythmic thwack hiss of the wipers and the roar of the tires on the wet pavement. I was on the interstate, heading south back to Portland, when my phone, mounted on the dashboard, lit up. It was the family group chat again. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it would be poison, but the compulsion to know what was being said about me was too strong. I waited until I hit a patch of slow traffic near the bridge to glance at the screen. Diane. Family. I am so sorry for the scene earlier. We are all a bit shaken up. Kylie had a bit of a meltdown and got physical. She broke some glass and was very aggressive, but she has left now. I felt bile rise in my throat. Diane. Please pray for her. Richard and I are heartbroken, but we forgive her. We know she is going through a difficult time mentally right now, and we just want her to get the help she needs. We are trying our best. Aunt Linda. Oh my heavens, is everyone okay? Sending prayers. Poor Diane. You do a saint's work. Cousin Mark. That is crazy, stay safe. Guys. Richard. Thanks, everyone. We are just trying to salvage the evening. Love to you all. I gripped the steering wheel so hard, I thought the leather might crack. Meltdown. Aggressive. Get the help she needs. They were doing it. They were rewriting reality in real time, broadcasting their version of the truth to the entire extended family before I had even made it home. By tomorrow morning, I would be the unstable daughter who attacked her stepmother on Christmas Eve. No one would ask me what happened. They would just whisper about me at church. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive the car off the bridge. The gaslighting was so complete, so absolute, that for a split second, a terrifying thought crossed my mind. Did I shove her? Did I imagine the slap? Am I actually the crazy one? My phone pinged again, a single, private message. It was from Grandma Evelyn. Grandma Evelyn. I am safe at home. I took a cab. Kylie? Grandma Evelyn. Do not let them win inside your head. Grandma Evelyn. Do you have proof? I stared at the words. Do you have proof? I thought about the photos on my phone. They proved I was hurt, but they did not prove how it happened. Diane could claim, and probably was claiming, that I did it to myself, or that I was injured while attacking her. It was my word against the word of the Saint of Vancouver. And then it hit me. The memory washed over me so clearly I almost slammed on the brakes. The kitchen, the argument. Where were we standing? By the island. In front of the refrigerator. The camera. I had bought that camera for my dad 2 years ago after a string of break-ins in their neighborhood. It was a high-end model, designed to upload footage to the cloud instantly in case the device was destroyed. And because my father was hopeless with technology, I was the one who set it up. I was the one who connected it to the Wi-Fi. I was the one who created the account. I was the admin. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic, hopeful rhythm. I pressed the accelerator, risking a speeding ticket as I flew down the highway. I needed to get to my laptop. I needed to see if it was still recording. I needed to know if the angle was wide enough. I parked my car in my apartment complex's garage and ran up the 3 flights of stairs. Ignoring the elevator, I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so bad I dropped them twice. I burst into my dark apartment, threw my coat on the floor, and scrambled for my laptop on the coffee table. I flipped it open. The screen glowed to life. I opened the browser. I typed in the security company's URL. My password was saved. Login successful. I clicked on Device List. Kitchen, online. I clicked View History. A timeline appeared at the bottom of the screen, marked with little yellow bars indicating motion and sound events. I scrolled back. 1 hour ago, 2 hours ago. There, a long yellow bar labeled Motion and High Decibel Sound Detected, 7:45 p.m. I clicked play. The video loaded. The quality was crisp, high definition, wide angle. There was the kitchen. There was the back of Diane's head. There was me, standing by the counter. The audio was crystal clear. "You are a burden, Kylie. That is all you are, a burden." I heard her voice coming from my laptop speakers, tinny but unmistakable. I watched as she mentioned my mother. I watched myself stand my ground. I watched her face contort into that ugly, hateful mask. And then, I watched it happen. I saw her raise her hand. I saw the swing. I saw the impact. I saw my head snap back. I saw her shove me. I saw me crash into the counter. I saw her hitting my arm while I tried to block her. It was all there, every second of it. Then, I saw the door open. I saw the guests. And I saw the transformation. I watched her slump, cover her face, and fake the tears. I heard her lie to my father. She just snapped. I was so scared. I sat back on my sofa, the laptop burning my thighs. Tears finally spilled over, hot and fast, running down my injured cheek. But they were not tears of confusion anymore. They were tears of relief. I was not crazy. I was not dramatic. I was not a liar. I had the truth, and it was not just a memory fading in the adrenaline of trauma. It was a digital file, 400 megabytes of objective, undeniable reality. I moved the cursor to the download button. Download to local drive. Save copy to external hard drive. Email copy to Sarah. I watched the progress bar fill up. 10%, 50%, 100%. The file sat on my desktop, a tiny icon that held the power to blow their entire world apart. I wiped my eyes. I looked at the group chat on my phone, where my aunt was still sending praying hands emojis. I picked up the phone and typed a reply to Grandma Evelyn. "Kylie, I have it. I have everything, audio and video." I stared at the screen, a strange calmness settling over me. The hurt was still there, deep and aching, but the fear was gone. Diane thought she had won. She thought she had successfully exiled me, humiliated me, and secured her narrative. She had no idea that she had just performed the closing act of her own play in front of an unblinking audience that never forgets and never lies. I closed the laptop. I did not delete the footage from the cloud account, but I changed the password so no one else could access it to delete it. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands steady for the first time in hours. Tonight, I would sleep. Tomorrow, I would go to war. Christmas morning broke over Portland with a deceptive calm. The rain had stopped, leaving the city scrubbed clean and gray. But inside my apartment, the air was thick with the static of a storm that had nothing to do with the weather. I woke up not to the smell of coffee or the sound of carols, but to the relentless vibration of my phone on the nightstand. It was buzzing against the wood like an angry hornet. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, and flinched when my fingers brushed against my left cheek. It was tender, hot to the touch. I swung my legs out of bed and walked to the bathroom mirror. The red mark from the night before had darkened into a bruise, a distinct, ugly shadow blooming across my cheekbone. I went back to the bed and picked up my phone. The screen was cluttered with notifications. Facebook, Instagram, text messages. I opened Facebook first. At the very top of my feed was a post from Diane. It had been posted at 8:30 in the morning. It was long, accompanied by a photo of her and my father sitting in front of their Christmas tree, looking somber and weary, holding hands. "It is with a heavy heart that Richard and I ask for your prayers this Christmas morning." The post began. I felt my stomach drop. I sat down on the edge of the bed and read. We try so hard to curate a life of joy and gratitude, but sometimes the shadows of the past are too long to outrun. Last night, our family dinner was cut short by a heartbreaking incident. We love Richard's daughter, Kylie, very much. We have always loved her as our own. But as many of you know, trauma is a difficult beast, and sometimes, despite our best efforts to provide stability, those we love struggle to accept it. I stopped breathing. The sheer audacity of it made my head spin. There was an outburst last night. Diane wrote, a frightening one. We are safe, though shaken. It breaks a mother's heart to see a child, even an adult child, flail so violently against the people who only want to help her. We are choosing to forgive the aggression and the breakage. We are choosing to focus on healing. Please pray for Kylie. Pray that she finds the peace she so desperately needs and accepts the help we have offered for so long. Below the text, there were hundreds of reactions. Sad faces, praying hands, heart emojis. And then I saw the first comment. It was from my father, Richard Jordan. Thank you. Everyone, we are doing okay. We have tried to get her into therapy for years, but you cannot save someone who does not want to be saved. We just want her to be well. The phone slipped from my hand and landed on the duvet. He lied. My own father, the man who had watched his wife assault me, went on a public platform and painted me as a mental case to protect his social standing. He knew I had been in therapy for 3 years, therapy to deal with the abandonment issues he caused. He knew I was stable. He knew I was the victim. But he chose her, again. I scrolled down, unable to stop myself. The comments were a landslide of judgment. Mrs. Gable, church choir director. Oh, Diane, you are a saint for enduring this. Step-parenting is thankless work, especially with the troubled ones. Neighbor Steve. I saw her car speeding off last night. Scared the life out of me. Stay safe. You too. These entitled kids today have no respect. Cousin Mark. So sorry you guys had to deal with that drama. She has always been a bit off. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to close my eyes. They were rewriting my life. They were taking my career, my independence, my sanity, and erasing it all, replacing it with a caricature of a hysterical, violent woman. Dramatic. That was the narrative. And now, they had published it to the world. I stood up and walked into the living room. My laptop was still on the coffee table where I had left it the night before. The little green light on the power adapter was the only steady thing in the room. I opened the laptop. The file was right there on the desktop. Kitchen Cam Event 1224 MP4. I needed to see it again. I needed to know that I hadn't lost my mind. I clicked play. The video opened. The audio was sharp and biting. You are a burden, Kylie. That is all you are, a burden. I watched Diane's face twist into that sneer. I watched the way she cornered me. I watched the slap. Crack. The sound was sickeningly loud in the quiet apartment. I watched myself stumble. I watched her shove me. I heard the glass shatter, and then I heard the words that cut deeper than the glass ever could. You ruin everything. You ruin everything. And then the switch. The instant fake tears when the men walked in. I paused the video on the frame where her hand was making contact with my face. I paused it again on the frame where she was shoving me into the counter. I was not crazy. I was not struggling. I was a 29-year-old woman who had been assaulted in her father's kitchen. I opened my email and composed a new message to Grandma Evelyn. I attached the video file. Subject: the truth. Body: I am not imagining this. I did not have an outburst. Watch this, please. I hit send. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. Kylie. Grandma Evelyn's voice was not the frail, trembling voice of an 80-year-old woman. It was low, vibrating with a cold, terrifying rage. "Did you see it?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I saw it," she said. "I watched it 3 times. I heard what she said about your mother." "They are posting about me, Grandma," I said, the tears finally spilling over. "Dad and Diane. They are on Facebook telling everyone I had a meltdown. They are saying I am unstable. Everyone believes them." "I know," Grandma said. "I saw the post. It is vile. It is a strategic dismantling of your character to discredit you before you can speak." "I do not know what to do," I sobbed. "If I say anything, I just look like I'm fighting back. I look like the drama queen they say I am." "No," Grandma said firmly. "Listen to me. You are not a child anymore. You are not the 17-year-old girl they silenced. You have evidence, real, hard evidence. If they are bold enough to drag your name through the mud in the town square, then you have every right to show the town square exactly who threw the mud." "You think I should post it?" "I think," Grandma said, "that the truth only sounds like drama to people who live on lies. You post it. You do not let them own the narrative for 1 second longer." I hung up. I wiped my face. I went into the kitchen and poured a glass of water. I drank it standing up, staring at the blank wall. Then I went back to my laptop. I took 3 screenshots from the video. The first was Diane blocking my path, her face contorted in rage. The second was the blur of motion as her hand struck my face. The third was me, backed against the counter, hands up in defense, while she advanced on me. I opened photo editing software and placed black bars over Diane's eyes and my father's face in the background. I did not want the post taken down for harassment. I wanted it to stay up. I wanted it to be irrefutable. I opened my own social media. I did not go to Facebook, where their echo chamber was strongest. I went to Twitter and Instagram. I took a deep breath and began to type. I forced myself to be cold. I forced myself to be a reporter of my own trauma. I usually keep my personal life private. I wrote, but this morning, I woke up to find that my family has decided to publicly characterize me as mentally unstable and violent to cover up what actually happened at Christmas dinner. I attached the 3 photos. I am a 29-year-old professional. I do not have a history of violence. Last night, after being insulted and deciding to leave a toxic environment, I was followed into the kitchen, cornered, slapped, and shoved into a counter by my stepmother. The outburst they are referring to was me trying to defend myself. The breakage was a picture that fell when she pushed me. I typed the final paragraph. I have the full video and audio from the security camera. I am not asking for prayers. I am asking for the lying to stop. Domestic abuse does not always look like a bruise. Sometimes it looks like a Facebook post blaming the victim. But in this case, I have both the bruise and the receipt. My finger hovered over the post button. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. If I did this, there was no going back. This was the nuclear option. This was burning the bridge so thoroughly that not even ash would remain. I thought of my father's comment, "You cannot save someone who does not want to be saved." "I am saving myself," I whispered. I clicked post. For the first 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then the notifications started. It wasn't the local church crowd. It was my network, my colleagues, former classmates, and then strangers. User 1. "Oh my God, I am so sorry. That screenshot of the slap is undeniable." User 2. "This is exactly what my mother-in-law does. The gaslighting is real. Stay strong." Sarah, my best friend. "I saw the bruises last night. I have the timestamps on the photos she sent me. This is 100% real." The post began to move. It was shared, retweeted. People started quoting it with their own stories of holiday toxicity, of narcissistic parents, of the missing reasons for estrangement. It wasn't just drama anymore. It was a case study. By noon, my phone was hot to the touch. The post had thousands of views. And then, the reaction from the other side came. I received a notification that Diane had tagged me in a new post. I didn't click the tag. I went to her profile. She hadn't apologized. She hadn't taken down her original post. Instead, she had escalated. "It is truly sad," Diane wrote, "to see social media used as a weapon to twist the truth. The images being circulated are heavily edited and taken completely out of context. We are dealing with a young woman who has a long, documented history of mental health struggles and perception issues. We are consulting with our legal team about this defamation. We love Kylie, but we will not be bullied by digital manipulation." She was calling the video fake. She was implying I was hallucinating the slap, and she was threatening to sue. I felt a wave of exhaustion so heavy it almost crushed me. It was like fighting a hydra. You cut off one lie, and two more grew in its place. They would never stop. They would never admit it. They would lie until the earth swallowed them whole. I sat on my floor, knees pulled to my chest. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, hollow ache. My phone rang again. It was Grandma Evelyn. "She is doubling down," I said, my voice dull. "She says the video is edited. She is threatening to sue me for defamation." "Let her threaten," Grandma said. Her voice was different now. It wasn't just angry. It was strategic. It was the voice of a woman who had played bridge for 40 years and remembered every card that had been played. "I am tired, Grandma," I confessed. "I just want it to be over. Maybe I should just delete it. Maybe I should just let them have their little kingdom." "No," Grandma snapped. "That is what they count on. They count on your exhaustion. They count on the fact that decent people get tired of fighting, while wicked people never sleep. But what can I do? It is my word against theirs on the internet. It is just a shouting match." "It stops being a shouting match when the law gets involved," Grandma said. "And I am not talking about her empty threats." "What do you mean?" "I mean," Grandma said, "that while Diane was busy writing her little Facebook essays this morning, I was busy making phone calls. I have an appointment tomorrow morning with Mariah Keller." I sat up straighter. "Mariah Keller? The shark? The one who handled the huge harassment case against the city last year?" "The very same," Grandma said. "She is expecting us at 9 o'clock. "Us?" "Yes, us. You bring that video. You bring those screenshots of their posts. You bring the text messages where they baited you into coming over." "Grandma, lawyers like that cost a fortune. I cannot afford—" "I am paying," she interrupted. "And we are not just going to talk about the assault. Kylie?" There was a pause on the line. I could hear the clock ticking in the background of Grandma's house. "We are going to talk about the trust," she said softly. "We are going to talk about the house. We are going to talk about how Richard has been mishandling the accounts Diane is so worried about restructuring." My eyes widened. I thought Dad owned the house." "Richard owns nothing," Grandma said, her voice icy. "The house is in the Jordan family trust, my trust. He is just the trustee, and a trustee can be removed if they are shown to be incompetent or acting against the interests of the beneficiaries." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Grandma," I whispered, "what are you going to do?" "I have spent 20 years biting my tongue to keep the peace," Grandma Evelyn said. "And all it got me was a son who lets his wife beat his child. The peace is over. Kylie." She took a breath, and I could practically see her straightening her spine, preparing for battle. "It is time to lift the rug," she said, "and show everyone exactly what they have been sweeping underneath it. Pack your things. You are staying with me tonight. I do not want you alone." "Okay," I said. "I am coming." I hung up the phone. I looked at the screen one last time. Diane's post was still there, racking up sympathetic likes from people who had no idea that the ground beneath their feet was about to open up. I stood up. I packed a bag. I grabbed my hard drive with the video. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a witness. And tomorrow, I was going to be a plaintiff. The office of Mariah Keller was located on the 14th floor of a glass tower in downtown Portland, overlooking the Willamette River. It was a space designed to intimidate. The furniture was chrome and black leather. The air smelled faintly of expensive espresso and old paper, and the view of the gray, rain-swept city suggested that the people inside were hovering above the chaos, not part of it. Grandma Evelyn and I sat on one side of a massive mahogany desk. On the other side sat Mariah. She was a woman in her 50s with a haircut so sharp it looked like it could cut glass and a pair of spectacles that she used to dissect people before she even spoke to them. I had placed my entire life on her desk. There was the thumb drive containing the security footage. There were color printouts of the photos showing the bruise on my cheek, which had turned a sickening shade of purple-yellow overnight. There were screenshots of Diane's Facebook posts, Richard's comments, and the hundreds of replies from strangers calling me unstable. And then there was my phone, open to the Notes app, showing 2 years of documented insults, gaslighting, and manipulation. Mariah did not speak for a long time. She watched the video on her monitor. She watched it once at normal speed. Then she watched it again in slow motion. Then she watched it a third time with the volume turned up so high I could hear the sickening crack of Diane's hand hitting my face echoing off the office walls. I stared at my hands, twisting the strap of my purse. I felt exposed. Showing this to a stranger felt like stripping naked. Finally, Mariah stopped the video. She took off her glasses and looked at me. "You have a very strong case for assault and battery," she said. Her voice was devoid of pity, which I appreciated. It was clinical. It was a weapon. The video is unambiguous. She strikes you. She shoves you. You are retreating. You are defensive. There is no provocation that justifies physical violence in the eyes of the law. She picked up the stack of screenshots. "And this," she said, waving the paper, "is defamation. She is publicly stating that you have a history of mental instability and violence to discredit your account of the assault. Since she knows the truth, because she was there, this is done with malicious intent. It is a textbook campaign to destroy your reputation." I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. "So I am not crazy?" "You are a victim of domestic violence and a coordinated smear campaign," Mariah stated flatly. "But we need to be strategic. Diane is playing the court of public opinion. We need to play the court of law. If we file, everything comes out. Her medical records, your medical records, the raw footage. Are you ready for that level of scrutiny?" "I have nothing to hide," I said. "Good." Mariah turned to Grandma Evelyn. "Now, Mrs. Jordan, you mentioned on the phone that there is a financial component to this? Something regarding the property?" Grandma Evelyn nodded. She sat straighter than I had ever seen her. She reached into her oversized leather tote bag and pulled out a thick binder. "My son and his wife live in a house in Vancouver," Grandma said. "It is a 5-bedroom property on 2 acres. The market value is currently hovering around $1.5 million. "And who holds the title?" Mariah asked. "The Jordan Family Trust," Grandma said. I frowned. "I thought Dad owned it. He always talks about his equity." Grandma turned to me, her eyes softening just a fraction. "Your father owns nothing, Kylie. When your grandfather passed away 20 years ago, we put everything into a trust to protect it. I am the primary grantor. Your father is a trustee, meaning he manages it, but he does not own the assets. He is allowed to live in the house as a beneficiary of the trust." She paused, then dropped the bomb that rearranged my entire understanding of the last 10 years. "And the trust stipulates that upon my death, or if the trustee is deemed unfit, the assets do not pass to Richard's spouse. They pass to the next lineal descendant." My mouth fell open. "Me?" "You," Grandma confirmed. "Diane does not get the house. She does not get the investments. If Richard dies, or if I die, she gets a small stipend for 1 year, and then she has to vacate. The house goes to you." The room went silent. The rain lashed against the window pane. Suddenly, everything made sense. The desperation, the constant attempts to paint me as unstable, the way Diane tried to drive a wedge between me and my father, the restructuring meeting with the estate attorney on Christmas Eve. "She knows," I whispered. "Doesn't she?" "She found out 6 months ago," Grandma said. "Richard let it slip that the trust terms were ironclad. That is when the urgency started. That is when she started talking about restructuring. She was trying to pressure Richard into convincing me to alter the trust. She wanted to prove that you were mentally unfit to be a beneficiary so they could bypass you and rewrite the terms in her favor." I felt sick, physically sick. The cranberry sauce, the insults, the slap. It wasn't just about petty jealousy. It was a $2 million shakedown. She wasn't just a wicked stepmother. She was a thief trying to steal my inheritance by driving me insane. That changes things, Mariah said, a predatory gleam entering her eyes. If we can prove that the defamation and the provocation were part of a scheme to interfere with your inheritance, we are looking at significant damages. And Kylie, your strongest asset isn't just the video. Mariah pointed a pen at Grandma Evelyn. It is her. It is very rare in these cases to have a matriarch stand against her own son. If Mrs. Jordan is willing to testify that she witnessed the abuse pattern and that she believes the motivation is financial, Diane is finished. But Mrs. Jordan, you need to understand what this means. You will be effectively severing ties with your son. Grandma Evelyn did not blink. She looked at the rain. I lost my son a long time ago, Ms. Keller. I lost him the day he decided that keeping his wife happy was more important than keeping his daughter safe. I am just finalizing the paperwork now. We left the office an hour later with a plan. Mariah would send a cease and desist letter immediately. Then, we would file the lawsuit. I went back to my apartment to pack more clothes, as I was terrified to stay alone. When I opened my laptop, I saw an email notification. It was from my father. The subject line was, Disappointment and Consequences. I sat on my couch and opened it. Kylie, I am writing this with a heavy heart. Your behavior on Christmas Eve and your subsequent actions on social media have made it impossible for us to move forward as a family right now. You are hurting Diane deeply. You are hurting my reputation. Until you take down those lies, apologize to Diane, and agree to enter a residential treatment facility for your anger issues, I am cutting off all support. You are no longer welcome at the house. We will not be providing any financial assistance for your bills or your rent. I hope this rock bottom helps you wake up. Dad. I read it twice, and then, for the first time in 24 hours, I laughed. It was a dry, barking sound. Financial assistance? I had not taken a dime from him since I was 22. I paid for my own college loans. I paid my own rent. I paid for my own car. I even paid for the damn Netflix account they used. He was so controlled by Diane that he did not even know the reality of his own daughter's life. He was threatening to cut a lifeline that did not exist. I forwarded the email to Mariah with a note. Add this to the pile. Evidence of coercion. 2 hours later, the cease and desist letter landed in their inbox and was served by a courier to their front door. I could only imagine the scene. Diane, probably nursing a glass of wine, expecting me to come crawling back begging for forgiveness, and instead, getting a legal document on heavy bond paper, signed by the most terrifying family lawyer in the state. The letter was explicit. It demanded an immediate retraction of all false statements regarding my mental health. It demanded they cease all communication with me, and it notified them to preserve all digital evidence, including text messages and emails, in anticipation of litigation. Diane's reaction was predictable. She did not retract anything. Instead, at 6 o'clock that evening, she posted a status update. It was vague enough to avoid violating the letter technically, but specific enough to rally her troops. It is a sad day when you realize that some people will go to any lengths to hurt the ones who raised them. Being threatened with lawsuits by your own children for simply trying to help them is a new low. We will not be silenced by bullying. Truth always wins. I sat by the window of Grandma Evelyn's guest room, watching the city lights flicker on through the drizzle. I held my phone in my hand. Truth always wins, I repeated softly. It was such a cliché, but looking at the cease and desist letter, looking at the video file, and knowing what I now knew about the trust, I realized something. Diane didn't care about the truth. She cared about the narrative. She cared about the audience. But a courtroom is not a dinner party. You cannot gaslight a judge. You cannot charm a jury when there is a video of you assaulting someone. Grandma Evelyn walked into the room. She was holding a cup of tea. She placed it on the coaster beside me. Mariah just called, Grandma said. She wants to know if you want to proceed with the full filing tomorrow. Once we file, it becomes public record. The press might pick it up. It will get ugly. Kylie. I took a sip of the tea. It was Earl Grey, hot and grounding. I thought about the years of holidays ruined. I thought about the word dramatic thrown at me like a stone every time I expressed a feeling. I thought about my mother's memory being used as a weapon in that kitchen. And I thought about the house, that house that Mom had picked out, the house where she had taught me to bake, the house Diane was trying to steal. Do it, I said. File the suit. You are sure? I have the evidence, I said, turning to look at my grandmother. And honestly, Grandma, I have heard enough. If stopping them means I have to be the villain in their story for a little while longer, then fine. I will be the villain, but I will be the villain who wins. Grandma Evelyn smiled. It was a small, grim smile. Good, she said, because while you are fighting the war on the surface, I have some work to do in the trenches. She walked over to the antique desk in the corner of the room. On it sat a stack of documents that she had been reviewing with her own separate lawyer, a trust attorney. I did not know the details yet. I did not know that she was not just preparing to testify. She was preparing to invoke the competency clause of the Jordan Family Trust. She was preparing to argue that by allowing his wife to assault the primary beneficiary and then participating in a cover-up, Richard had violated his fiduciary duty as a trustee. She was not just going to defend me, she was going to fire him. Grandma picked up her fountain pen. The scratching sound of the nib on the paper was loud in the quiet room. Go to sleep, Kylie, she said, not looking up. Tomorrow, we take the rug away. I lay down on the bed, but I did not sleep for a long time. I listened to the rain. For the first time in my life, the sound did not make me feel lonely. It sounded like the drum roll before a battle. And I was ready. The petition was filed on a Tuesday morning. It was a stack of paperwork 3 inches thick, titled Kylie Jordan versus Diane Jordan and Richard Jordan. The charges were assault, battery, defamation of character, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We did not send it quietly. Mariah Keller, my attorney, ensured that the filing was accompanied by a formal request for a temporary restraining order, triggering an immediate hearing. In the state of Washington, when you present credible evidence of domestic violence, the courts tend to move with a speed that terrified my father and infuriated his wife. By Thursday, the whispers had started. Vancouver is a large suburb, but the social circles of the wealthy and the church-going are incredibly small. The cease and desist letter had been the warning shot, but the lawsuit was the cannonball. I stopped going to my usual coffee shop. I set my social media profiles to private, though I left the original post up as a testament. But even with the privacy settings, the messages seeped through. A direct message from Mrs. Gable's daughter, a girl I had babysat 10 years ago, popped up on my phone. I saw what your stepmom posted. She wrote, and then I saw what you posted. I just wanted to say, I believe you. She made me cry once at the church picnic because my skirt was too short. And then she told my mom I was seeking attention. She is mean. Kylie, good for you. Another message came from a former neighbor of my dad's, a man who had moved away 5 years ago. Richard is a good man, but he has no backbone. The text read, I watched that woman isolate him from his brother, and now she is doing it to you. Give them hell. These little digital notes were like oxygen. They reminded me that the perfect family facade Diane had constructed was actually full of cracks. People had seen through it all along. They had just been too polite, or too afraid, to say anything. Until now. The hearing for the protective order was scheduled for 9 o'clock on Friday morning at the Clark County Courthouse. I arrived early with Grandma Evelyn and Mariah. I wore a charcoal gray suit, armor for the modern woman. I had used concealer to cover the bruising on my cheek, not because I was ashamed, but because I did not want to give Diane the satisfaction of seeing her handiwork on display. The judge would see the photos. Diane did not need to see the pain. When we entered the courtroom, they were already there. Diane had undergone a transformation. Gone were the velvet dresses and the diamond earrings she usually flaunted. She was wearing a beige cardigan that looked 2 sizes too big, a simple white blouse, and zero makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, slightly messy bun. She held a wad of tissues in her hand, twisting them nervously. She looked frail. She looked harmless. She looked like a grieving mother who had been dragged out of bed by an ungrateful child. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. My father sat next to her. He wore a navy suit, but his tie was crooked. He looked 10 years older than he had at Christmas. He did not look at me. He stared at the wooden table, his jaw working tight, grinding his teeth. We took our seats. The air in the room was stale and cold, smelling of floor wax and anxiety. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Harrison entered. She was a woman in her 60s with short gray hair and a face that suggested she had heard every lie ever told in a courtroom and was impressed by none of them. "We are here in the matter of Jordan versus Jordan," the judge said, shuffling the files. "This is a hearing for a temporary order for protection. Ms. Keller, you may proceed." Mariah stood up. She did not use big words. She did not use flowery language. She simply laid out the facts. "Your Honor," Mariah said, her voice filling the room. "On the night of December 24th, my client, Kylie Jordan, was physically assaulted by her stepmother, Diane Jordan, in the kitchen of her father's home. Following this assault, both respondents engaged in a public campaign of harassment and defamation on social media, characterizing the victim as mentally unstable to discredit her report of the violence. We are asking for a no-contact order to ensure my client's safety and to prevent further harassment." Diane's lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, who looked like he cost $500 an hour, stood up. He smoothed his tie and gave me a look of pitying condescension. "Your Honor," Sterling began, his voice smooth like oil, "this is a tragic misunderstanding blown out of proportion by a young woman with a documented history of emotional volatility. Mrs. Jordan loves her stepdaughter. The incident in question was a mutual altercation started by the petitioner. Ms. Jordan was hysterical. She was breaking glass. My client was simply trying to restrain her from hurting herself or others. We believe this lawsuit is a retaliatory act by a troubled young woman seeking attention." He gestured to Diane, who dabbed her eyes with a tissue and let out a soft, trembling sob. "Ms. Jordan has a history of outbursts," Sterling continued. "She cried uncontrollably at her mother's funeral. She has caused scenes at family gatherings. We have affidavits from family friends stating that she is often dramatic." There was that word again, dramatic. I felt my hands curl into fists under the table. They were using my grief, my humanity, my very ability to feel pain, as evidence that I was crazy. "She is easily triggered," Sterling concluded. "And while Mrs. Jordan regrets that things got heated, she vehemently denies striking the petitioner. She was defending herself." Judge Harrison looked over her glasses at Mariah. "Ms. Keller, do you have a response?" Mariah did not argue. She did not debate the definition of volatility. She simply picked up a remote control and pointed it at the large flat-screen monitor mounted on the wall facing the judge's bench. "Your Honor," Mariah said, "we would like to submit Exhibit A. This is video footage captured by a high-definition security camera located in the kitchen where the assault took place. The camera is motion-activated and records his audio." Diane's head snapped up. For the first time, the frail mother mask slipped. Her eyes went wide. She looked at Richard. Richard looked at the screen, his face draining of color. They had not known about the camera. They thought it was just my word against theirs. Mariah pressed play. The courtroom was silent, save for the hum of the ventilation system. And then, the sound of Diane's voice cut through the air, tinny but unmistakable. "You are a burden, Kylie. That is all you are, a burden." I watched the judge's face. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes narrowed. On the screen, the scene played out. Diane cornering me, the venom in her voice, the way I backed up, my hands open, my posture defensive. "Do not talk about my mother," the video Kylie said, her voice shaking. She would hate you, the video Diane screamed. And then, the slap. Crack. The sound was louder in the courtroom than it had been in my apartment. It echoed off the wood paneling. It was a violent, ugly sound. Diane flinched in her seat. The video continued, the shove, the glass breaking, the physical blows to my arm while I tried to shield my face. And then, the most damning part, the door opening, the instant transformation, the fake tears. She just went crazy, the video Diane sobbed. Mariah paused the video on the frame where Diane's hand was making contact with my face. Your Honor, Mariah said quietly, does this look like self-defense? Does this look like a woman restraining a hysterical child? Or does this look like an unprovoked assault followed by a calculated performance? The courtroom was dead silent. No one moved. Even the court reporter had stopped typing for a second, staring at the screen. Diane was not crying anymore. She was staring at the table, her face a mask of red blotchy shame. She knew, everyone knew, the dramatic narrative had just been shattered by 400 megabytes of reality. I would like to call Evelyn Jordan to the stand, Mariah said. Grandma Evelyn stood up. She walked to the witness box with the dignity of a queen. She took the oath, her hand steady on the Bible. Mrs. Jordan, Mariah asked, you are the mother of the respondent, Richard Jordan? I am, Grandma said. And you were present in the house that night? I was. Can you tell the court what you observed? Grandma Evelyn adjusted her glasses. She looked directly at Richard, who refused to meet her eyes. Then she looked at Diane. I have watched my daughter-in-law pick at Kylie for 12 years. Grandma said. Her voice was clear, strong, and resonant. I have watched her criticize Kylie's job, her appearance, and her personality. I have watched her treat my granddaughter like a servant in her own father's house. Every time Kylie reacted, every time she showed hurt or sadness, she was told she was being dramatic. She was told she was too sensitive. Grandma paused. It was a method of control, she continued. If you call a woman crazy long enough, no one listens when she screams for help. I watched it happen. I stayed silent because I wanted to keep the peace. I did not want to lose access to my son. She took a deep breath, and her voice thickened with emotion. But on Christmas Eve, I saw the bruises on Kylie's face. I saw the lies they posted on the internet the next morning, and I realized that peace purchased at the expense of my granddaughter's safety is not peace. It is complicity. So, to clarify, Mariah asked, you believe Kylie Jordan is in need of protection? I believe, Grandma said, leaning into the microphone, that if you do not grant this order, Diane will continue to hurt her, not just physically, but by destroying her reputation and her life. Diane does not know how to stop. She only knows how to win. Thank you, Mariah said. No further questions. Diane's lawyer declined to cross-examine. He was smart enough to know that attacking an 80-year-old grandmother who had just delivered a sermon on truth would be legal suicide. Judge Harrison cleared her throat. She looked at Diane. Mrs. Jordan, the judge said, the video evidence is quite compelling. It depicts a clear act of physical aggression initiated by you. It also depicts a disturbing lack of truthfulness in the immediate aftermath. Diane opened her mouth to speak, but the judge raised a hand. I am granting the temporary order for protection. Judge Harrison ruled. You are to have no contact with Kylie Jordan, no phone calls, no texts, no emails, no social media posts referencing her, directly or indirectly. You are to stay 500 feet away from her residence and her place of employment. The judge then turned her gaze to my father. Mr. Jordan, she said, you are not named as the primary aggressor in the physical assault, but you are named in the defamation suit. I suggest you think very carefully about your online activity moving forward. Enabling abuse is not a crime I can rule on today, but harassment is. If you violate the spirit of this order by acting as a proxy for your wife, I will hold you in contempt. Do I make myself clear? Yes, Your Honor, my father whispered. His voice was so quiet I barely heard it. Court is adjourned. The gavel banged. I let out a breath, my shoulders sagging. It was over, for now. We walked out into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I felt lightheaded. Diane and Richard exited the courtroom a moment later. Diane walked fast, her head down, clutching her purse to her chest as if it were a shield. She did not look at me. She looked like a trapped animal seeking an exit. Richard lingered for a second. He looked at me, then he looked at his mother. His eyes were wet. He looked like he wanted to say something. Maybe, "I'm sorry," maybe, "Come home." But then he looked at Diane's retreating back, and the fear took over again. He turned and followed her. He chose her. Even after seeing the video, even after the judge scolded him, he chose the abuser because he was too weak to choose the truth. I felt a pang of sadness, but it was dull, like an old ache. Grandma Evelyn stood beside me, watching them go. She adjusted the strap of her purse. "Well," she said, "that went about as well as could be expected." "Thank you, Grandma," I said, hugging her side. "I could not have done this without you." Mariah began packing her briefcase. "We have the protective order. Now we move to the civil suit for damages. The defamation case is strong, especially with the judge's comments on the record." "Wait," Grandma said. She placed a hand on Mariah's arm. "There is more?" I asked. Grandma Evelyn's eyes were hard as flint. She looked down the hallway where my father had just disappeared. "The protective order keeps her away from Kylie's body," Grandma said. "But we need to make sure she can never touch Kylie's future." She turned to Mariah. "This was just the surface, Ms. Keller. The real work starts now. I want to review the terms of the removal of a trustee for cause. Richard allowed a beneficiary to be assaulted on trust property and then participated in a cover-up. I believe that constitutes a gross violation of his fiduciary duties." I stared at her. "Grandma, you are going to evict them?" "I am going to protect the asset," Grandma corrected. "And I am going to protect you. The house belongs to the family, Kylie, and as of today, I do not recognize Diane as family, and I'm starting to have my doubts about Richard." She buttoned her coat. "They cannot run away from a trust hearing," she said. "Let us go get some lunch. I have a feeling I'm going to need my strength." I watched her walk toward the elevators, her cane tapping a steady rhythm on the marble floor. I realized then that the slap in the kitchen had not just broken a glass. It had broken the dam that had held back 20 years of my grandmother's patience. I followed her. The video had silenced their lies, but Grandma Evelyn was about to silence their bank accounts. The court-ordered mediation took place in a conference room on the 6th floor of a neutral legal building in downtown Portland. It was a room designed to suck the emotion out of the air. The walls were a bland, inoffensive beige. The carpet was gray, and the table was a massive slab of oak that stretched between us like a demilitarized zone. On one side sat the opposition, Diane, looking pale and deceptively fragile in a soft blue sweater. My father, Richard, who seemed to have shrunk 3 inches since the court hearing, and their attorney, Mr. Sterling, who was checking his watch as if he had a tea time to catch. On the other side sat my team, Mariah Keller, looking sharp enough to draw blood, myself, and Grandma Evelyn. Grandma had not said a word since we entered the building. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded over her leather handbag, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere above Diane's head. She looked like a statue carved from granite, waiting for the pigeon to land so she could crush it. The mediator, a retired judge named Mr. Vance, cleared his throat. "The goal today is to find a resolution before we proceed to a full civil trial," he said. "I want to remind both parties that anything said in this room is confidential. Now, who would like to begin?" Diane leaned forward. She did not look at me. She looked at the mediator, her eyes wide and swimming with unshed tears. "I would like to speak," she said softly. "Go ahead," Mr. Vance said. Diane took a deep breath, one that shuddered through her frame. "I just want to say, we want to save this family. Richard and I have barely slept. We are heartbroken that it has come to this. We love Kylie. We have always loved her." She turned her head slowly, finally meeting my gaze. Her eyes were pleading, but I knew that look. It was the same look she gave me right before she handed me a list of chores on Christmas Eve. "Kylie," she said, "we are willing to put this behind us. We are willing to forgive the misunderstanding in the kitchen. We just want you to come back to us. We want you to drop this lawsuit. It is tearing your father apart." "And the posts?" Mariah asked, her voice cutting through the syrup. "Well, of course," Diane said, blinking rapidly. "We would expect Kylie to take down her social media posts. They are very damaging to Richard's reputation in the business community. If she takes hers down, we will agree not to mention the incident again. We can all just reset." I felt a bitter laugh bubbling up in my throat. A reset, as if she hadn't slapped me, as if she hadn't spent 10 years gaslighting me, as if she hadn't tried to convince the world I was insane. "It was..." "So," Mariah said, leaning back in her chair, "your offer is that my client drops a valid assault claim, removes the evidence of her abuse, and returns to the status quo. And in exchange, you agree to stop lying about her?" "We are offering peace," Mr. Sterling interjected smoothly. "Litigation is expensive and ugly. Ms. Jordan is young. Does she really want to spend the next 2 years of her life in depositions? We are offering a clean slate, a private apology from Diane for any perceived slight, and a confidentiality agreement signed by both parties. No admission of guilt, just moving on." "A perceived slight?" I repeated. "It is a standard term," Sterling said dismissively. Mariah looked at me, then back at them. "Here is our counteroffer. Diane Jordan will post a public retraction on all platforms, admitting that her previous statements regarding Kylie's mental health were false. She will admit, in writing, to the physical assault captured on video. Richard Jordan will issue a statement apologizing for enabling the harassment, and you will pay damages for medical costs and emotional distress." Diane gasped. "I will never do that. That would ruin us." "You ruined yourselves when you decided to hit my client and then brag about it on Facebook," Mariah said calmly. "We will not agree to a public admission," Sterling said, slamming his folder shut. "That is non-negotiable. If that is your stance, we are wasting our time. Kylie needs to be realistic. She is an adult daughter suing her parents. The jury might not look kindly on that." "The jury will look at the video," Mariah reminded him. "The video shows a heated family argument," Sterling countered. "It is open to interpretation." I looked at them. I looked at my father, who was staring at his hands, refusing to engage. He was letting Sterling and Diane do the dirty work, just like he always let Diane do the dirty work of excluding me. "It is not open to interpretation," I said. The room went quiet. It was the first time I had spoken. "Kylie, please," my father whispered. "Don't be difficult." "Difficult?" I asked. I turned to Diane. "You want me to silence myself. That is the deal, isn't it? I shut up. I take down the truth, and you pretend to love me again. That has been the deal since I was 17. Be quiet. Be helpful. Don't complain. And maybe we won't call you crazy." "We are trying to help you," Diane insisted, her voice rising. "You are clearly struggling." "I am not struggling," I said, my voice steady. "I am winning. And that is what scares you. You want me to settle because you know that if this goes to trial, everyone will see who you really are. You want me to be the bigger person because that makes it easier for you to stay small." "Kylie, honey," Richard said, reaching across the table as if to touch my hand. I pulled back. "Family is family. You do not drag family into court. You do not air dirty laundry. Can't we just go back to how it was? For me? For you?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized that the pedestal I had placed him on had crumbled into dust a long time ago. "Dad, you watched her hit me, and then you went online and told the world I was the problem. Family doesn't do that. The family you are trying to save is just a cover story for your own comfort." Richard stammered. I just want peace. You do not want peace, I said. You want compliance, and I am done complying. Then we have nothing to discuss, Diane snapped, her mask falling away completely. She looked at Sterling. We are leaving. Let her sue. She has no money. She will run out of funds long before we do. Actually, a voice said from my right, I do not think that is entirely accurate. Grandma Evelyn moved. She did not stand up. She simply shifted in her chair and lifted her heavy leather bag onto the table. The sound of it hitting the wood was heavy, solid, and final. She reached inside and pulled out a thick binder. It was not the legal filings for the assault case. It was a blue binder with the gold seal of the Jordan Family Trust embossed on the front. What is this? Sterling asked, frowning. This, Grandma Evelyn said, her voice low but carrying a weight that made the air in the room feel heavy, is the notification of the restructuring of the Jordan Family Trust. Diane rolled her eyes. Oh, Evelyn, please, we do not have time for your little games. We are talking about the lawsuit. We are talking about consequences, Grandma said. She opened the binder. She did not look at the papers. She knew them by heart. She looked at Richard. Richard, she said, do you recall the competency clause in the trust agreement you signed 10 years ago? My father frowned, confusion clouding his face. Surely you do not mean… Clause 14, Section B, Grandma recited. Any trustee may be removed immediately and without notice if they are found to be acting in a manner that is detrimental to the primary beneficiaries, or if they demonstrate a lack of moral judgment that endangers the assets or the reputation of the family. Richard went pale. Mom, what are you doing? I am doing what I should have done years ago, Grandma said. I formally invoked the clause this morning. My attorney filed the papers with the county clerk at 8 o'clock. She slid a document across the table. It stopped right in front of Diane. You see, Grandma continued, her voice devoid of emotion, allowing your wife to physically assault a beneficiary, Kylie, on trust property, and then participating in a public defamation campaign that exposes the family name to legal liability is a gross violation of your fiduciary duty. You cannot do that, Diane said, her voice trembling. He is the trustee. He manages the estate. Not anymore, Grandma said. Richard has been removed as trustee, effective immediately. So what? Sterling scoffed, though he looked uneasy. So you appoint a bank? A third party? That doesn't change the lawsuit. No, Grandma said, a small, cold smile touching her lips. The trust stipulates that in the event of the removal of the primary trustee, the position passes to the next lineal descendant of legal age. She turned her head slowly and looked at me. Congratulations, Kylie, Grandma said. You are now the sole trustee of the Jordan Family Trust. I stared at her. My mouth fell open. What? You control the assets, Grandma said. You control the investments, and most importantly, you control the real estate. Diane's face went from pale to a blotchy, terrified red. She understood instantly. The house, Diane whispered. The house, Grandma confirmed. The house you are living in. Diane, the house you filled with your furniture, the house where you slapped my granddaughter. That house belongs to the trust, and Kylie is now the manager of that trust. You can't, Diane shrieked. She stood up, her chair scraping violently against the floor. That is our home. You cannot just give it to her. Richard, do something. Richard was slumped in his chair, looking like a man who had just watched his life dissolve. Mom, please, that is all we have. You had a daughter, Grandma said, and you threw her away to protect a woman who abuses her. This is illegal, Sterling barked, though he was already frantically flipping through the document Grandma had slid across the table. We will contest this. This is undue influence. It is ironclad, Grandma said calmly. I wrote the trust. I know what it says. And I have the video evidence of the assault that proves Richard failed to protect the beneficiary. No judge in this state will reinstate him. She turned back to Diane, who was standing there, breathing hard, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Diane looked trapped. She looked small. For the first time, I saw her not as the monster who controlled my life, but as a pathetic woman who had built her castle on sand. "You wanted to talk about power, Diane," Grandma said. "You wanted to talk about who has the right to be in that house. You told Kylie she was a burden. You told her she had to leave." Grandma Evelyn stood up then. She wasn't tall, but in that moment, she looked 10 feet high. She leaned across the table, her eyes locking onto Diane's with a ferocity that made me hold my breath. "You hit my granddaughter and called her dramatic," Grandma said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper that echoed in the silent room. "From now on, the only drama you will face will be from the court and from the fact that you are living in a house owned by the woman you assaulted." Diane opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "You will not touch my granddaughter again," Grandma said. "You will not mention her name. You will not post about her, because if you do, Kylie has the legal authority to evict you within 30 days. She paused, letting the words hang in the air like a guillotine blade. "You wanted her to be independent?" Grandma asked. "Well, she is independent now. She owns the roof over your head." The room was dead silent. Even Mr. Vance, the mediator, looked stunned. I looked at my father. He was covering his face with his hands. I looked at Diane. She was trembling, tears of genuine terror streaming down her face. And then I looked at Grandma Evelyn. She picked up her bag, smoothed her coat, and looked at me. "Come along, Kylie," she said. "I think we are done here. We have a lot of paperwork to review." I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my head was clear. I looked at Diane one last time. "I will expect a written apology," I said. "By Monday, or I will see you in court." I turned and walked out of the room, leaving the silence behind me. The fallout of a nuclear explosion is often more dangerous than the blast itself. In the weeks following the mediation, the radiation of the truth began to seep into the groundwater of Vancouver's polite society. It started small. A reporter for the Columbian, the local newspaper, picked up the filing from the courthouse. It was not a front-page story, just a few inches in the Metro section with the headline, "Restraining Order Granted in High-Profile Family Dispute, Security Footage Cited as Key Evidence." The article did not name the specific prominent local developer, but in a town like ours, anonymity is a myth. Everyone knew who Richard Jordan was, everyone knew who Diane was, and everyone who had seen Diane's hysterical Facebook posts knew exactly who the plaintiff daughter was. The silence from the Grace Community Church crowd was deafening. For years, Diane had ruled her social circles with a velvet glove, dispensing judgment and charity in equal measure, but the video footage, or at least the description of it that had leaked into the rumor mill, changed the calculus. It is one thing to support a strict mother dealing with a troubled child. It is another thing entirely to align yourself with a woman who slaps her stepdaughter in the kitchen and then lies to the police about it. I watched the social decay from a distance. A friend of mine, who still attended the church, sent me screenshots of the ladies' prayer group chat. User left the group. User left the group. User left the group. There were no dramatic exits, just a quiet, steady exodus of people who no longer wanted to be associated with the Jordan brand. Then came the direct messages to me. One came from the wife of the church deacon, Kylie. "I am ashamed to say I believed the stories Diane told us about you being unstable. I should have asked for your side. I am so sorry for what you went through." I did not reply to all of them. I did not owe them absolution. But reading them felt like pulling splinters out of my skin. One by one, the narrative was shifting. The label of dramatic was peeling off, revealing the bruises underneath. But the social isolation was nothing compared to the financial reality crashing down on my father and stepmother. With the trust restructuring activated, the house in Vancouver, the 5-bedroom monument to Diane's ego, was no longer their property to rule. It was an asset under my management. We held a meeting with the trust attorney to formalize the new living arrangements. I did not attend in person. I dialed in via Zoom, keeping my camera off. I did not want to see them. I just wanted them to hear my voice. As the new trustee, the lawyer explained, his voice dry and professional, Ms. Jordan has a fiduciary duty to ensure the trust assets are generating appropriate value. Therefore, Richard and Diane Jordan may continue to reside in the property, provided they sign a standard lease agreement and pay fair market rent. Rent? Diane's voice cracked over the speakerphone. We have to pay rent to live in our own house? It is not your house, Mrs. Jordan, the lawyer corrected. It is the trust's house, and the fair market value for a property of that size in that neighborhood is approximately $4,200 a month. I heard a gasp. We cannot afford that, Diane shrieked. Richard's income has dipped since the rumors started. We cannot pay $4,000 a month to her. Then, I said, speaking into my microphone, you are free to vacate the premises. I can list the property for rent by the first of the month. I am sure we can find a tenant who pays on time. There was a long silence on the other end. I could imagine my father's face, gray, defeated, realizing that the power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted. He was no longer the lord of the manor. He was a tenant, and I was the landlord. We will pay, Richard whispered. Excellent, the lawyer said. Checks are due on the 1st. Late fees apply. Knowing that Diane had to write a check with my name on it every 30 days felt like a poetic justice that no amount of screaming could achieve. It was a constant, monthly reminder that she lived there by my grace, not her entitlement. Meanwhile, the civil suit for damages was barreling toward a trial date. Mariah Keller was preparing to depose Diane, a prospect that terrified Diane's legal team. They knew that put under oath. With the video playing on a screen next to her, Diane would crumble. She would perjure herself within 5 minutes. Her lawyer called Mariah on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. They want to settle, Mariah told me. What are the terms? I asked. I was sitting at my desk at work, staring at a spreadsheet, but my heart was pounding. They are offering a lump sum of $50,000, Mariah said, to cover your medical bills, therapy costs, and legal fees, but more importantly, they are agreeing to your non-monetary demands. They will retract the statements, they will post a public apology approved by us, and they will agree to a permanent injunction preventing them from disparaging you online ever again. I closed my eyes. $50,000 was a lot of money, but it wasn't about the cash. It was about the surrender. Do we take it? Mariah asked. We could get more at trial, maybe. But a trial is brutal, Kylie. It will drag on for another year. It will be every headline in the local paper. Do you want to live in that fight for another 12 months? I thought about my life. I thought about the knot of anxiety that tightened in my chest every time I checked my email. I thought about Grandma Evelyn, who was 80 years old and deserved to spend her remaining years in peace, not in a courtroom. No, I said, I do not want the fight anymore. I just want the truth on the record. Okay, Mariah said. I will draft the agreement. The settlement was signed 3 days later, and the following morning, at 10 o'clock sharp, the notification popped up on my phone. Diane had posted. I opened Facebook. It was a text-only post. No photos, no emojis, no flowery language about blessings. It was stark, written in the legal language we had forced her to use. Statement regarding Kylie Jordan. On December 25th, my husband Richard and I made public statements regarding Richard's daughter, Kylie, that characterized her as mentally unstable and violent. We acknowledge now that these statements were untrue and unfair. We admit that on Christmas Eve, an altercation occurred in our home where Kylie was the victim of physical aggression, not the instigator. We apologize for the harm our words and actions have caused her reputation and her well-being. We ask that our friends and community respect her privacy and the truth of this matter. It was stiff. It was humiliated. It was clearly written by a lawyer. And it was perfect. I read it 3 times. I expected to feel a surge of triumph, a desire to run a victory lap, but I didn't. I just felt light. It was the feeling of putting down a heavy backpack after hiking for 20 miles. I didn't need them to mean it. I knew they didn't. Diane probably hated every keystroke. Richard probably drank 3 scotches before he let her hit post. But that didn't matter. The truth was out there. It was digital. It was permanent. They could never call me dramatic again without the entire world knowing they were liars. I screenshotted the apology and saved it to my folder titled Freedom. Life, surprisingly, did not stop for my family drama. In fact, it accelerated. At Lighthouse Horizon Media, my boss called me into her office the week after the settlement. I was nervous. I thought maybe the drama had leaked into my work, that I had been too distracted. Instead, she slid a contract across the desk. "You have handled the chaotic Johnson account with incredible poise this last quarter," she said. "Honestly, Kylie, I do not know how you kept your head straight with whatever personal stuff you had going on, but the client loves you. We want to promote you. Lead content strategist. You will have a team of 3 reporting to you." I looked at the new salary figure. It was a 20% raise. "Thank you," I said, shaking her hand. "I would love to." I realized then that the resilience my family had forced me to build, the ability to function while the world was burning down, was actually a superpower in the corporate world. They had tried to break me, but they had accidentally forged me into steel. With the promotion and the settlement money, I made some changes. I moved out of my small, dark apartment in the Pearl District. I found a place in a converted warehouse building in the Slabtown District. It had floor-to-ceiling windows that let in the gray Portland light, high ceilings, and a balcony where I could grow herbs. It felt open. It felt like a place where secrets couldn't hide. I did not spend the settlement money on clothes or cars. That money felt heavy, like blood money. I wanted to wash it clean. I took Grandma Evelyn to the best geriatric specialist in the state for a full workup. I paid for it out of pocket. We found out her blood pressure was a little high, likely from the stress of dealing with her son. But otherwise, she was strong. Then, I hired a security contractor to upgrade Grandma's house. We installed a top-of-the-line alarm system, reinforced locks, and yes, cameras, not to spy on her, but to make sure she felt safe. "You do not have to do this, honey," she told me as the technicians were wiring the front door. "I do," I said. "You protected me when no one else would. Now I protect you." The rest of the money went into a savings account I named the Fortress. It was my Never Again fund, money that ensured I would never, ever have to rely on anyone who hurt me. But the biggest change wasn't the apartment or the job. It was the Tuesday evenings. Every Tuesday at 6 o'clock, I sat on a beige couch in a quiet office in Northwest Portland and talked to a woman named Dr. Aris. Therapy wasn't magic. It was hard work. It was painful. We spent weeks just unpacking the word dramatic. "It is a silencing tactic," Dr. Aris explained. "By labeling your reaction to abuse as drama, they made you question your own reality. They made you the problem, so they never had to look at their own behavior." We worked on the guilt. That was the hardest part. Even with the lawsuit won. Even with the apology. I still woke up some nights feeling a crushing weight of guilt for ruining the family. I felt guilty that my dad was humiliated. I felt guilty that they were struggling to pay the rent to the trust. "You did not ruin the family," Dr. Aris told me. "You just turned on the lights. The mess was already there. You just stopped stumbling over it in the dark." Slowly, the guilt began to recede. I learned to recognize gaslighting in other parts of my life. In dates, in friendships. I learned to trust my gut. If I felt hurt, it was because I was hurt, not because I was crazy. My social circle changed, too. I stopped saying yes to everything. I stopped trying to please people who drained me. I lost a few friends who thought I had been too harsh on my father. "He is still your dad," they would say. "Yes," I would answer. "And I am still his daughter, but that title does not grant him the right to abuse me." Those friends drifted away. In their place, I found new ones. I reconnected with Sarah, who had stood by me through the whole thing. We started a hiking club. We spent weekends in the Columbia Gorge, standing on top of mountains, breathing air that felt cleaner than anything I had ever known. One rainy afternoon in November, about 10 months after the incident, I was sitting in a coffee shop working on a strategy deck for work. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank app. Deposit received. $4,200. Source: Richard and Diane Jordan. I stared at the notification. They had paid the rent. Again. I took a sip of my latte. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt a quiet sense of order. The check cleared. The system worked. I closed the notification and went back to work. The dramatic daughter was doing just fine. In fact, she was running the show. It is almost exactly 1 year since the night the crystal pitcher shattered on the kitchen floor. The calendar on my refrigerator says December 20th. Outside, the Portland sky is doing what it always does this time of year, weeping a steady, gray drizzle over the city. But inside my new apartment in Slabtown, the air is warm and smells of rosemary, garlic, and the expensive beeswax candles that I bought simply because I liked them, not because I was trying to impress a property developer. Tonight is a celebration. It is a small gathering, intimate and curated. There are no cousins from Seattle asking why I am single. There are no business partners discussing asset allocation over turkey. There is just Sarah, 2 other close friends from my hiking club, and sitting in the most comfortable armchair by the window, Grandma Evelyn. We are celebrating 2 things. First, we are celebrating the holidays on our own terms. Second, we are celebrating the ink drying on a document that arrived via courier this afternoon. As of today, I am officially the co-trustee of the Jordan Family Trust, sitting alongside Grandma Evelyn with full signature authority. I moved through the kitchen, checking the roast chicken. My movements were fluid, unhurried. I remembered how I used to move in my father's house, frantic, terrified, bracing for criticism. Here, in my own space, nobody was timing me. Nobody was checking to see if the garnish was perfectly symmetrical. "Kylie," Grandma Evelyn called out. "Come here for a moment, sweetheart. Let Sarah watch the oven." I wiped my hands on a towel and walked over to the living room. Grandma looked regal in a deep burgundy sweater. Her silver hair caught in the glow of the floor lamp. She held a small velvet box in her hands. It was old. The velvet was worn down at the corners, revealing the cardboard underneath. "I wanted to give this to you privately," she said, her voice raspy but warm. "But with everything that happened this year, I think it is fitting to do it now, while you are surrounded by people who actually love you." She handed me the box. My hands trembled slightly as I took it. I opened the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of yellowed satin, was a delicate silver chain with a small pendant shaped like a lark. My breath caught in my throat. "This is Mom's. She wore it the day she brought you home from the hospital," Grandma said softly, "when she passed, and Richard moved on so quickly." I took it from her jewelry box. I knew Diane would either throw it away or, God forbid, try to wear it herself to play the part of the grieving widow. I ran my thumb over the cool silver bird. I could almost feel the memory of my mother's skin. "I kept it in my safe deposit box for 12 years, Grandma continued. "I told myself I would give it to you when you were safe, when you were strong enough to keep it without anyone taking it from you." She reached out and cupped my cheek, the same cheek that had been bruised a year ago. "You protected yourself, Kylie," she whispered. "You stood up, you fought back, and now you are safe. Your mother would be so incredibly proud of the woman you have become." Tears pricked my eyes, but they were good tears. They were healing tears. "Thank you, Grandma." I put the necklace on. The silver felt heavy and grounding against my collarbone. It felt like armor. I went back to the kitchen to pull the chicken out of the oven. As I set the heavy pan on the trivet, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was an email notification. The sender was Mr. Sterling, Diane's lawyer, copying the trust attorney. I hesitated. The old instinct to panic flared up for a microsecond. The fear that they were attacking again, that there was a new lawsuit, a new lie, but then I touched the silver lark at my throat, took a breath, and opened the email. Subject: Notice of vacancy. Property at 442 Evergreen Terrace. I read the text. It was dry, formal, and bureaucratic. To the trustees, please accept this formal notification that Richard and Diane Jordan will be vacating the premises at 442 Evergreen Terrace effective January 15th. Due to changes in their financial circumstances and the restructuring of the trust requirements regarding fair market rent, my clients have elected to downsize to a more manageable residence. The keys will be surrendered to the property management company on the date specified. I stared at the screen. They were leaving. There was no dramatic eviction scene. There were no police officers dragging them out. There was no screaming on the lawn. It was just math. The trust required them to pay rent. They could not afford the rent because their reputation had tanked and their income had dried up. So, they were leaving. They were losing the castle Diane had used to lord over everyone for a decade. They were losing the stage where she performed her plays of domestic perfection. They would have to move into a condo or a small rental, somewhere anonymous. They would have to live small. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, pouring wine into glasses. "Yeah," I said, a small smile touching my lips. "Better than okay. They are moving out. The house is empty." "Cheers to that," Sarah said, clinking her glass against the counter. But the universe wasn't quite done with me yet. Later that evening, after the food was eaten and the wine was finished, and my friends had gone home, leaving just me and Grandma, there was a knock at the door. It was late, nearly 9 o'clock. I frowned, checking the peephole. There was no one there. I opened the door. Lying on the welcome mat was a thick cream-colored envelope. I picked it up. My name was written on the front in handwriting I knew better than my own. It was my father's handwriting, but there was no return address, and notably, there was no second signature, no swirling, loopy Diane next to his name. I walked back into the living room. Grandma was sipping chamomile tea. She saw the envelope and stiffened. "Richard?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. I sat down on the sofa and tore it open. It wasn't a legal document. It was a letter, written on plain notebook paper. "Kylie, I am writing this while Diane is packing the china. I know I am not supposed to contact you directly, but I asked your grandmother to pass this along, or I will drop it off myself. I do not know if you will read it. We are moving. The house is too much for us now, but I know that is not the reason. The reason is that the silence in these hallways is too loud. I have spent the last year being angry at you. I told myself you were vindictive. I told myself you embarrassed us. But last week, I found an old tape, not the ones we were going to watch on Christmas, but an older one. You were 5. You were sitting on my shoulders at the zoo. I watched it, and I realized that the man in that video would have killed anyone who hurt you. And then I looked in the mirror, and I saw the man who stood by and watched his wife hit you, and then helped her lie about it. I am a weak man. Kylie, I chose the path of least resistance. I chose peace over my own daughter. And the irony is, I ended up with neither. I lost you, and I am living in a house full of resentment. I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve it yet. But I wanted you to know that I know. I know you were telling the truth. And I am sorry I did not protect you. I am sorry I let you be the one who had to be strong. Dad. I lowered the paper. The room was quiet, save for the sound of the rain against the glass. A tear slid down my nose and landed on the paper, blurring the word sorry. It hurt. It hurt differently than the slap. The slap was sharp and hot. This pain was dull and heavy. It was the grief of finally accepting that my father was not a villain. But he was not a hero either. He was just a coward. He loved me, but he did not love me enough to be brave. "He is sorry," I whispered. Grandma set her cup down. "He should be. He says he is a weak man." "Self-awareness is the first step," Grandma said, her voice unyielding. "But it does not undo the bruises, Kylie, and it does not undo the years of neglect." "I know," I said. I wiped my eyes. "I do not feel like running to him. I do not feel like fixing it for him." "Good," Grandma said, "because you cannot." I stood up and walked to my desk. I pulled out my laptop. I opened my email and typed a new message. 2. Richard Jordan. Subject, read letter. Dad, I received your letter. Thank you for the apology. It matters that you said it. I am not ready to see you. I do not know when I will be. I have built a life that is peaceful, and I cannot risk letting chaos back in right now. If and when we do meet, it will be in a public place. It will be on neutral ground, and it will not be in that house. That house is closed. Take care of yourself. Kylie. I hit send. I did not offer love. I did not offer absolution. I offered boundaries, and that felt like the healthiest thing I had ever done. I walked out onto the balcony. The rain had slowed to a mist. The city lights of Portland were spread out below me, a grid of gold and amber reflecting on the wet streets. The air was cold, crisp, and clean. Grandma Evelyn followed me out, wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself. She stood next to me, looking out at the view. You have a nice view up here, she said. You can see everything coming. Yeah, I said. I like seeing what is coming. We stood in silence for a moment. Honey, Grandma said, using the endearment she hadn't used since I was a child. Do you ever regret it? Do you ever regret blowing it all up? We could have just let it go. You would still have a father who calls you. You would still have family dinners, even if they were miserable. I thought about the question. I thought about the moment Diane's hand connected with my face. I thought about the crushing weight of the gaslighting, the way they made me feel crazy for 12 years. I thought about the feeling of walking on eggshells, of swallowing my voice until my throat ached. And then I thought about tonight, the laughter in my kitchen, the silver necklace around my neck, the check from the trust, the letter from my father admitting the truth. No, I said, I do not regret it. I turned to her. If I had stayed silent that night, I said, they would still be hitting me. Maybe not with their hands every time, but with their words, with their stories. They would be hitting me with that word, dramatic, until there was nothing left of me. The only difference is, there wouldn't be a camera to record it. Grandma reached out and squeezed my hand. Her grip was strong. Sometimes, she said, looking me right in the eyes, the bravest thing you can do is believe that your feelings are real, even when the whole room is calling you a liar, even when they call you dramatic. Drama is just conflict that people want to ignore, I said. I just stopped ignoring it. And look at you now, Grandma smiled. You are the director of the whole show. She kissed my cheek and went back inside to warm up. I stayed on the balcony for a moment longer. I looked at the city. Somewhere out there, in the dark, Diane was packing boxes. Somewhere out there, Richard was sitting in silence. And here, I was standing in the light. I went back inside. I sat down at my desk. I opened a blank document on my laptop. For a year, I had let the lawyers tell the story. I had let the court filings tell the story. But now, it was time for me to tell it. Not for revenge, but for the record. For the next girl who is told she is too sensitive when she cries over her dead mother. For the next daughter who is told to shrink so her stepmother can feel tall. I placed my fingers on the keys. I felt a surge of power, pure and undiluted. I typed the title, Stepmother Beat Me for Being Dramatic. Then my grandma looked her in the eyes and said, I smiled. The story of Kylie Jordan was finally beginning, and for the first time in my life, I held the pen, and nobody was going to edit me ever again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please leave a comment below with your city or country so we can see how far this community reaches. If you enjoyed Kylie's journey of justice, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share these stories with more people who need to hear them. See you in the next video.